Hey guys, tonight we begin with a careful breath, a slow inhale and a soft, steady exhale. Let your shoulders loosen. Let the world become a little quieter. Welcome to the Midnight Narrator. Tonight we take on one of the oldest questions humans have ever asked. What happens after we die? Scientifically and philosophically. We'll move slowly, gently, and with curiosity. This will be a calm, careful exploration. Not a rush toward answers, but an invitation to sit with the questions themselves. Before we settle in and begin our peaceful journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if what I share here truly resonates with you. Your support helps me create more of these videos, and if you feel like it, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see the many corners of the world where we connect. Now, dim the lights, make yourself comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's journey together as we explore what lies ahead. In tonight's long documentary, we will move deliberately through many ways people have tried to answer this question. We'll begin close to home, with the universal feeling of mystery that death brings. Then we'll walk through the biology of dying, the unusual phenomena reported at the edge of death, the hard philosophical puzzles about consciousness, and into more speculative possibilities, from reincarnation and collective fields of mind to quantum ideas and digital immortality. Each chapter will be a gentle step, clear, grounded, and full of images you can rest into. If you stay with me to the end, we'll gather those threads into a quiet reflection on what a life and a death might mean. If you feel your mind wandering at any point, gently bring your attention back to your breath. This is a film made for listening slowly. Let's begin. A soft pause. Breathe in slowly and exhale. Chapter 1. The Final Mystery. Humanity's deepest question. Close your eyes for a moment if you like. Picture a single point of light in a wide, dark plain, a small lantern swinging in the hands of someone walking home. Around that light, shapes form and fade. Houses, trees, the soft curve of distant hills. The light is small, but it guides. The question of what happens after death is like that lantern. For every culture, every language, and every time in history, it has been the light people carry as they move through the long night. Why does this question never leave us? Why do we keep circling back to it, generation after generation? At its core, the question touches a human knot of experiences: loss, wonder, fear, and curiosity. We are beings who feel deeply, who watch others change, wither and disappear. We build attachments to people, places, stories, and each loss presses a new hole into the map of what we know. Death is unique among our mysteries because it is universal. Everyone dies, and yet, paradoxically, each of us experiences it only indirectly, through loss, memory, and imagination. We are intimate with the idea of dying, but largely ignorant of its first-hand reality. That gap between inevitability and mystery is fertile soil for questions. Across the globe, from the painted tombs of ancient Egypt to the quiet hospital rooms of today, cultures have tried to answer this question in ways that make life bearable, meaningful, or at least understandable. In ancient Egypt, death was a doorway. Elaborate rituals, careful preservation of the body, and spells carved in stone were practical ways to prepare the person's journey. In classical Greece, philosophers debated whether the soul went on and what that meant for ethics and the good life. In many indigenous traditions, death is less of an end and more of a change in relationship, a return to ancestors, the land, or a cycle that includes both living and non-living things. These cultural responses are not merely about facts, they are artful, psychological, and social. They carry the practical task of helping communities live with loss. A funeral, after all, is part grieving and part organising. It tells a story about who a person was, and it reminds the living how to go on. The stories we tell about death give shape to grief. They teach children how to mourn, and they explain why we keep our dead close in memory and ritual. But why does the question keep surfacing in fresh forms, even when answers seem plentiful? Part of the reason is the human mind's appetite for coherence. We look for patterns. We want our lives to fit a curve that makes sense. Birth, meaning, purpose, and hopefully some satisfying conclusion. When something resists that pattern, when a beloved person vanishes or a life is cut short, we're driven to search for narratives that restore order. These narratives can become religions, philosophies, or scientific programs. Psychology gives us more precise ways to understand this drive. The awareness of mortality shapes much of human behaviour in subtle ways. Social psychologists have shown that when people are reminded of death, they cling more tightly to their worldviews and values, a phenomenon called terror management. The fear of death can sharpen our desire for meaning, security, and legacy. It can also make us avoidant. Modern life, with its conveniences and distractions, often zips the question shut. Opt for Netflix, move on, don't dwell. Yet avoidance rarely extinguishes curiosity. It postpones it. At quieter moments, in the late hours, the question unrolls again. We can trace how fear of death sparked many of humanity's greatest creations. Religion often gives direct answers: a soul, a judgment, a rebirth. Doctrines that promise continuation, justice, or reconciliation. Art, too, was often born from the sorrow and wonder at impermanence. Think of elegies written by moonlight, paintings that catch a last smile, songs that keep a voice alive. Even science in its modern form is partly a response to mortality, an attempt to extend life, to understand the mechanics of living things, and to make death a more predictable event. There's an essential paradox here worth feeling into. Though every person dies, none of us can fully report what it is like. We rely on second-hand accounts, ancient scripture, anecdote, and inference. This creates a unique blend of humility and boldness in the human spirit. Humility, because we must accept that our direct knowledge is limited. Boldness, because we nonetheless attempt deep stories about who we are and what might come next. That interplay has shaped centuries of thought. Let me tell you a small story, not of facts, but of how this mystery touches ordinary lives. Imagine a shoemaker in a small village long ago. Each day he tapes leather, bends thread, and listens to the rhythm of the town. He has small pleasures: a grandson's laugh, the smell of coffee at dawn. One evening a neighbour dies suddenly. The village gathers, ritual blankets are wrapped, and people speak of the person's generosity. Around the fire the shoemaker finds himself wondering, where did his neighbour go? He remembers the neighbour's eyes, steady as flint. That night, the shoemaker dreams of walking down a river. The neighbour at his side, pointing to a place where the current opens into light. He wakes with a heavy, soft feeling, both comforted and unsettled. For him, the question after death becomes practical. How will I live so that, if there is any continuity, my life ripples in a way that matters? This tiny scene is representative. The mystery of death is never merely theoretical. It enters kitchens, beds, and quiet streets. It changes how people parent, how they make bargains, and how they seek forgiveness. The anticipation and the fear shape our small choices. Another essential thread is how societies cope with the unknown through ritual and taboo. Some cultures sanctify death with elaborate rites, others shrink from it, sequestering the dying and the dead. Modern Western societies often sanitize death. Hospitals move death away from the home, and in doing so they remove some of the social practices that made grief communal. That very practical shift has psychological consequences. When death is hidden, grief can become fragmented, and existential questions may feel lonelier. Yet there are countercurrents, hospice movements, death cafes, and new rituals that invite conversation about mortality. These are gentle attempts to reclaim the conversation and to place it back into the shared world. In this first chapter, we only begin to sketch the landscape. The question, what happens after death, is not a single road, but a branching network of human responses, myths and rituals, clinical descriptions, philosophical puzzles, and the quiet interior work of accepting finitude. Each branch offers a different kind of comfort, explanation, or call to action. As we move through later chapters, we will visit the clinical rooms where bodies stop, the brain's last electrical storms, the surprising reports from those who came close and returned, and the philosophical arguments about what consciousness might be. We will meet ancient wisdoms and modern experiments, scientific skepticism and mystical insight. If you stay with me, you'll hear a careful balance of possibility and restraint, neither denying the mystery nor pretending it's already solved. For now, rest into the strange companionship of this question. Imagine it as a river beside which generations have set up small fires, sometimes to ward off cold, sometimes to warm their hands, sometimes to tell stories that make the night less absolute. Our path tonight walks alongside that river. We'll trace tributaries and cross stones. We won't pretend to know the final shore. But together we will learn how human hearts, minds, and communities have lived with this lantern of wonder. A gentle invitation before we close this chapter. Later, in chapter 2, we'll turn to the body itself, to the precise ways life winds down, and what doctors and biologists observe. In chapter 3, we'll listen to how the brain behaves at the brink, and much later, toward the end, we'll bring the threads together and reflect on what these many perspectives might mean for how we live now. There are surprises ahead, discoveries and quiet paradoxes that will, I hope, deepen your sense of curiosity rather than end it. Take a breath. Let your eyelids rest if they wish. The lantern of our question will continue to glow as we walk. Chapter 2. The Biology of Dying. When life physically ends. Before we continue our quiet journey tonight, take a moment to ease your breath. Inhale gently and let it go. Feel the space around you soften. You're safe here, in this space of stillness, reflection, and curiosity. We've just wandered through the mystery of death as an idea, a question that has haunted, inspired, and shaped humanity since the beginning. But now, let's move closer to the physical threshold, the biological process of dying itself. What actually happens when life ends? What unfolds in the silent minutes when the heart stops beating and the breath slows to nothing? Tonight, we'll take a calm, step-by-step journey through the science of dying, not with fear, but with gentle fascination. Because understanding how life fades from the body is not morbid. It's a way of seeing how delicate, miraculous, and interconnected our existence truly is. So, dim the lights a little more, get comfortable, and let's explore what happens when life physically ends. For most of history, death seemed simple. A person stopped breathing, their heart stopped beating, and they were gone. But science has revealed something far more intricate. Death is not a single instant, it's a process, a gradual unwinding of systems that once worked in perfect harmony. Imagine the body as a vast orchestra. Each organ plays its part. The lungs provide air, the heart keeps rhythm, the brain conducts. But when one section falters, others try to compensate. When the heart stumbles, the brain signals for more oxygen. When the brain slows, the organs begin to shut down. Eventually the symphony quiets, not with a crash, but with a fading note, softer and softer, until there's only silence. Doctors define clinical death as the moment when the heart stops beating and blood flow ceases. No pulse, no breath, no oxygen reaching the brain. Yet even here, the body doesn't simply stop. Instead, an intricate biological choreography begins, one that can last minutes, hours, even days after the moment of death. When the heart ceases, oxygen-rich blood can no longer reach the organs. The brain, hungry for oxygen, begins to fail within seconds. After about 10 seconds, electrical activity in the cerebral cortex starts to flicker. After 30 seconds, consciousness likely fades. This is the point when most people would lose awareness. But deeper in the brainstem, other structures continue firing, regulating reflexes, releasing neurotransmitters, trying to maintain stability. After 2 to 3 minutes, cells begin shifting into emergency mode. Deprived of oxygen, they switch to anaerobic metabolism, an inefficient process that produces lactic acid and leads to chemical chaos inside the cell. After 5 minutes, neurons, especially those in the cortex, begin dying. Yet not all parts of the body surrender so quickly. Skin cells, bone marrow cells, even parts of the digestive system can remain alive for hours. Scientists have observed heart cells in lab conditions still twitching after the organism has been declared dead. Muscle fibers can contract. Certain immune cells continue working, trying to repair what can no longer be repaired. It's astonishing. Life doesn't end cleanly. It fades like the final glow of embers, each part extinguishing at its own pace. For physicians, especially those in intensive care or emergency rooms, witnessing the end of life is both routine and extraordinary. They see the fragile boundary between functioning systems and the stillness that follows. When the heart monitor flatlines, a thin tone fills the room, that steady, unwavering sound that films often dramatize. But in reality, the scene is quieter. Doctors or nurses may check the pulse, shine a light into the eyes. The pupils often dilate, wide, dark pools, because the muscles that control them lose tension. The skin cools. The body grows pale as blood settles under gravity, creating faint purplish marks known as livor mortis. One doctor described it like this: "There's a moment when the warmth leaves and you can feel the shift. It's as if the room exhales, yet even here, the body is not completely lifeless. Deep inside, thousands of microscopic processes continue. Cells sending out last chemical messages, mitochondria burning through their remaining fuel, DNA still coiled and intact." In recent years, scientists have made surprising discoveries about what happens after the body's been declared dead. In 2017, a study published in Nature Communications found that certain genes, particularly those linked to stress response and development, actually become more active after death. In zebrafish and mice, gene activity increased for hours, even days, as if the body were trying to repair itself. In humans, researchers observed that some brain cells, specifically glial cells that support neurons, can remain active for up to 12 hours after death. These cells even grow extensions, almost as if reaching for something that's no longer there. This discovery startled scientists. It means death is not a single switch being turned off, but a slow cascade of fading lights, some flickering long after the main power is gone. Even bacteria, particularly those in the gut, begin a strange kind of afterlife. As the immune system shuts down, they multiply freely, moving through tissues and breaking down organic matter. This natural process, known as autolysis and putrefaction, eventually returns the body's materials to the earth. but in a deeper sense it continues the cycle of life. What was once you becomes nutrients, atoms, and energy for other living things. In that way, nothing truly disappears. It simply transforms. While biology can describe the physical processes of dying, the question of when consciousness ends remains far murkier. When does the self, the awareness that says I am, finally vanish? Most researchers agree that as oxygen drops, the brain's organised patterns of activity dissolve. Yet some observations challenge the simplicity of this picture. In 2013, scientists at the University of Michigan studied the brains of dying rats. They found that just after cardiac arrest, when the heart stopped, the rats' brains produced a burst of organised gamma waves, the same patterns linked to heightened awareness in waking humans. It was as if, in the seconds after the heart stopped, the brain flared with one final surge of activity. Similar findings have since been noted in humans. Some patients who were declared clinically dead still showed complex brainwaves for several minutes afterward, rhythms suggesting that consciousness, or at least the brain's architecture for it, may linger briefly after the body fails. This is where biology begins to brush against mystery. We'll explore this further in the next chapter, but for now, hold on to the image of that fading surge, a final burst of coordinated light, like the last bright spark before darkness folds in. Hospice nurses and doctors often describe a peculiar stillness that arrives in the final moments. The breathing changes first, shallow, rhythmic, like waves that slowly space apart. There may be long pauses, then one final exhalation that simply doesn't draw back in. Family members sitting nearby often speak of the room feeling lighter, or quieter, or strangely peaceful. Some report that the dying person seems to smile faintly, or that the air feels charged, almost sacred. These moments may not be scientifically measurable, but they are deeply human. They reflect how we experience transitions as both endings and beginnings. One hospice nurse once said, "Every death is like a door closing softly." There's a silence afterward that feels full, like the room is listening. In that silence, families grieve, yet something profound often happens too. Laughter, memories, gratitude. The biology of dying gives way to the psychology of remembrance, and in that sense, the process of dying extends beyond the body into the hearts of those who remain. From a purely biological standpoint, death isn't a failure. It's a built-in feature of the living system. Every cell in your body is programmed with apoptosis, a kind of cellular suicide that removes damaged or unnecessary cells. Without this, you couldn't grow, heal, or even maintain your shape. In that sense, death exists within life at every scale. Nature depends on cycles. Decay feeds growth, endings enable beginnings. Leaves fall and nourish the soil. Old stars explode and seed the universe with heavier elements. Even galaxies die, only to give birth to new worlds. Death is not the opposite of life. It is part of its rhythm. When you see it that way, dying becomes less an abrupt cut and more a gradual blending. The final act of a symphony that began with birth and has been changing keys ever since. So far, we've looked at death through the lens of biology, as a physical process, measurable and observable. But this physical ending raises deeper questions. If the body continues to flicker with small signs of life after death, does that mean consciousness lingers too? Where does awareness go when the brain shuts down? In the next chapter, we'll explore the mysterious frontier between life and death, the dying mind itself. We'll follow the electrical storm that happens in the brain at the moment of death. We'll listen to stories of people who were pronounced dead and came back describing vivid experiences, and we'll ask what those experiences tell us about consciousness. and about the possibility that awareness may not depend entirely on the living body. For now, take a slow, steady breath. Let the science settle in your mind, not as something grim, but as something wondrous. The body, in all its complexity, knows how to live, and it also knows how to die, gracefully, naturally, and beautifully. There is peace in that rhythm, a pattern that reminds us life is not fragile because it ends. It is precious because it flows. Chapter 3. The brain at the brink, the science of the dying mind. Before we drift deeper, take a slow breath in and let it out gently. Feel your body soften into the surface beneath you. Tonight, we move closer to one of the most fascinating and mysterious frontiers in all of human experience, the moment when the brain stands at the threshold between life and death. In the previous chapter, we walk through the body's physical journey, the slowing heart, the fading organs, the gradual dimming of the biological orchestra. But now, we turn our attention inward to the conductor of that orchestra, the brain. What happens inside the mind as life fades? Does consciousness simply vanish, like a flame extinguished? Or is there a flicker, a final burst of awareness before it all goes quiet? For centuries, philosophers, mystics, and scientists alike have tried to describe what happens in the moments surrounding death. Yet, it is only in recent decades, with the help of brain imaging, cardiac monitoring, and advanced neuroscience, that we've begun to catch glimpses of what might actually occur in the final seconds of life. What we've found is surprising, sometimes unsettling, and often strangely beautiful. Imagine for a moment that your brain is a vast city at night. Billions of neurons, like tiny buildings, glow with electrical light. Messages travel through long, branching highways of connections. This city never truly sleeps. Even when you dream, parts of it remain active, constructing landscapes of memory and imagination. But when the heart stops, the city's power grid begins to fail. Streetlights flicker, whole districts go dark. Yet, for a brief, astonishing moment, before the city goes silent, all the lights surge brighter than ever, one final burst of brilliance before the blackout. This moment has been recorded many times in scientific studies. When researchers monitored the brains of dying animals and later dying humans, they discovered something unexpected: a surge of organized, high-frequency brain activity immediately following cardiac arrest. Rather than fading into nothing, the brain seems to enter a hyperactive state. This final electrical storm, as scientists sometimes call it, involves gamma waves, the same brain waves associated with high-level consciousness, vivid dreams, and deep states of meditation. In 2013, researchers at the University of Michigan observed this phenomenon in the brains of rats at the moment of death. After the animal's heart stopped, brain activity didn't drop instantly. Instead, it spiked, producing powerful gamma oscillations across the brain's networks. These patterns resembled the kind seen during moments of intense awareness in living creatures. The finding raised an extraordinary question. Could the mind become more active, even hyper-aware, in the seconds after the body begins to die? Since then, similar patterns have been detected in human patients who are being monitored in intensive care units. In one case, doctors recorded the brainwaves of a patient who suffered cardiac arrest. After the heart stopped, the EEG machine, which measures electrical activity in the brain, captured a brief but striking surge of coordinated activity. It was as if the brain, in its final moments, was trying to make sense of itself, or perhaps releasing something deeply stored within. No one yet knows what these final waves mean. Are they the random firings of neurons losing oxygen? Or are they the brain's last, desperate attempt to integrate its own experience, to create one final moment of consciousness, one last internal world? This is where science meets poetry. Because when people who have survived near-death experiences describe what they saw or felt, the tunnel, the light, the sense of floating, the review of their lives, these reports eerily align with what the brain might be doing in that very moment of dying. A flood of memory, a surge of chemicals like dopamine and endorphins, a storm of synchronized neural firing that could produce extraordinary sensations of clarity, peace, or transcendence. To understand this better, we have to explore the chemistry of the dying brain. When oxygen levels fall, the brain releases a cocktail of neurochemicals, including serotonin, endorphins, and DMT, a naturally occurring psychedelic compound found in tiny amounts in the human body. These substances can induce vivid, dreamlike visions, a sense of oneness, and even feelings of encountering light or beings of presence. The dying brain, in essence, may create a final profound hallucination, one that feels more real than reality itself. Yet, here is where things become even more intriguing. Not all scientists believe these experiences are simply chemical illusions. Some argue that the coherence and structure of these reports, their consistency across cultures, times, and medical conditions, suggest something deeper. How could people who are clinically dead for several minutes describe similar sequences, floating above their bodies, meeting loved ones, entering a light, even when their brains should have been completely inactive? To this day, that puzzle remains unsolved. Some neuroscientists propose that consciousness may persist briefly even after measurable brain activity ceases. Others speculate that our instruments are still too crude to detect subtle forms of neural coherence that might exist during this transition. And a growing number of researchers, especially in the fields of consciousness studies and quantum biology, wonder if awareness might not depend entirely on the brain at all. To put it another way, the dying brain might not be the end of consciousness, but a bridge. The moment where awareness, no longer tethered to physical processes, dissolves into something larger. Of course, this idea cannot be proven, but it continues to fascinate those who stand at the crossroads of science and philosophy. Let's pause here for a moment and picture what that transition might feel like. You're lying in a hospital bed. Machines beep softly. Your breathing slows. The world begins to fade. Not abruptly, but gently, colours dissolving, sounds stretching into silence. Then just as your body slips away, something extraordinary happens inside your mind. Memories flood in, not as fragments, but as one continuous tapestry. You see your childhood, your loves, your mistakes, your moments of kindness and regret, all at once, interwoven, luminous. You're not watching them. You're inside them. There is no sense of time, only presence, only understanding. Many people who have been revived after cardiac arrest describe precisely this: a life review, vivid beyond imagination, yet filled not with judgment, but compassion. As if in those last seconds the mind gathers everything it ever was and sees it clearly for the first time. Some neuroscientists believe this may result from the temporal lobe, the region involved in memory and emotion, firing intensely as oxygen levels drop. But others suspect something else, that consciousness, freed from its usual boundaries, experiences a state beyond linear time, a state where past, present, and future merge. We don't know which interpretation is true, but what is clear is that the moment of dying is far more dynamic than we once thought. The brain doesn't simply power down, it transitions, and in that transition, something deeply human occurs. Perception shifts, time stretches, and identity blurs. There's another mystery here that science has only recently begun to face. In some cases, after cardiac arrest, when doctors have tried to resuscitate patients, the brain's activity restarts in patterns similar to those before death. It's almost as if the mind remembers where it left off, as if consciousness, momentarily interrupted, returns to the same page. This continuity has profound implications. Could it be that consciousness is more resilient than we realize? That it lingers like an echo, waiting for the body to catch up, and yet the boundary remains unclear? How long can awareness persist after the heart stops? At what point does it fade completely? These are not just scientific questions, they're philosophical ones too. Because to understand where consciousness ends, we must first understand what consciousness truly is. We'll explore that more deeply in a later chapter. For now, we stand at the brink, the edge between biology and mystery. There's a haunting beauty in this threshold. The brain, a structure that has spent a lifetime constructing reality, weaving sensations, memories, and dreams, now begins to dissolve its own creation. But it doesn't go quietly. It releases light, energy, and perhaps even meaning. Whether that is an internal reflection or a passage into something beyond, no one can say. Some doctors who have been present during this moment speak of it in almost reverent tones. One neurologist once said, "The brain at death is not an ending, it's a transformation. It behaves as though it's trying to tell one last story. The story of everything that ever mattered. That story may be brief in earthly time, but subjectively it might feel endless. For those who experience it, even a few seconds could stretch into an eternity of understanding. So as you sit here tonight, listening in the calm quiet, let your thoughts wander gently. The dying mind, this fragile, complex system of cells and sparks, may be the final witness of existence. Its last act is not silence, but light. And that light, whether it is born of neurons or something greater, reminds us of something profound. Awareness itself, the simple experience of being, may be the most mysterious thing we will ever encounter. As the body fades, the mind does not fall abruptly into darkness. It drifts through memory, sensation, perhaps even peace, before settling into whatever comes next. In the next chapter, we'll follow those who have crossed that boundary and returned. People who've been clinically dead, yet speak of experiences so vivid, so structured, and so consistent that they've challenged everything science thought it knew about death. These are the stories of near-death experiences, the glimpses beyond the threshold. So, take another gentle breath. Let your body rest a little deeper. The journey is only just beginning, and the questions grow even more wondrous from here. Chapter 4, Near-Death Experiences, Glimpses Beyond the Threshold. Before we begin, take a slow breath, in and out. The world around you grows quieter, softer. Let your thoughts settle like dust drifting through a beam of evening light. Because tonight, we stand at the very edge of the known, the fragile boundary between life and whatever lies beyond. Across history, across continents, and across belief systems, countless people have claimed to cross that threshold, to step into death, and then return. Their stories, often dismissed or doubted, have persisted with striking consistency. No matter where they come from, a hospital in New York, a monastery in Tibet, a desert in Egypt, the experiences sound hauntingly familiar. A bright light, a tunnel, a sense of peace so deep it defies words. A feeling of leaving the body, floating above it, and watching as doctors and nurses struggle to revive what was once you. The reunion with loved ones long gone, and sometimes a voice or a presence, asking the most profound question of all: are you ready to go? These are the stories of near-death experiences, or NDS, a phenomenon that has fascinated scientists, mystics, and philosophers alike. For decades, they were dismissed as hallucinations, mere artifacts of a dying brain. But as medical technology advanced, something remarkable happened. More and more people began surviving clinical death, and the accounts they brought back were too vivid, too structured, and too similar to ignore. Imagine for a moment your consciousness detaching from your body. You're in a hospital room, your heart has stopped, machines are blaring, and people are rushing to your side. Yet you find yourself calm, clear, and strangely detached, watching everything unfold from above. You see your own body on the bed, the medical team working frantically, the fluorescent lights gleaming off the steel instruments. You hear voices, each detail sharp, every word distinct. But you are not afraid. You feel light, as if a great weight has been lifted. Then suddenly the scene fades, and you find yourself moving through a tunnel of immense darkness, drawn toward a radiance that seems alive, not just bright, but aware. This is what millions have described, and though no two experiences are identical, there are patterns, recurring motifs that transcend culture and belief. The tunnel, the light, the presence of deceased relatives or beings of light, the overwhelming feeling of unconditional love, and the life review, a panoramic replay of one's existence, not from a place of judgment, but of pure understanding. The first major scientific exploration of NDEs began in the 1970s, when psychiatrist Dr. Raymond Moody published his groundbreaking book, Life After Life. In it, he compiled hundreds of accounts from people who'd been clinically dead and revived. Their descriptions were astonishingly similar, regardless of age, background, or religion. Dr. Moody coined the term near-death experience to describe this cluster of phenomena. Since then, medical researchers have studied thousands of cases. One of the most ambitious studies came from Dr. Sam Parnia, a critical care physician and researcher in resuscitation science. His AWARE project, Awareness During Resuscitation, spanned multiple hospitals and sought to verify whether people could recall real events during cardiac arrest. Astonishingly, some patients accurately described details that occurred while their brains were flatlined, moments that, by conventional science, they should have been incapable of perceiving. One man, for instance, was clinically dead for several minutes. When he was revived, he described floating above his body, watching the resuscitation efforts from near the ceiling. He could recount the appearance of the room, the medical staff, and even specific sounds, all later verified by the team. What makes this so extraordinary is that during cardiac arrest, blood flow to the brain ceases almost instantly, and within seconds the cortex, responsible for perception, awareness, and memory, should shut down. And yet awareness seemed to persist. Skeptics, of course, have proposed explanations. Some suggest that these experiences occur not during death, but during the moments of revival, when the brain is flooded with oxygen and neurochemicals. Others point to psychological mechanisms, the mind's attempt to create meaning or comfort in the face of annihilation. Yet even these theories fail to explain the remarkable consistency of NDES, or the verifiable details some people have reported while clinically dead. There is also the question of the light. Many describe it not as a simple brightness, but as something sentient, a conscious radiance that seems to emanate love, understanding, and peace. People often say that when they encounter this light, they feel as though they are home. Time ceases to exist. Every worry, every fear dissolves. Some say they communicate with this presence, though not with words. It's as if entire lifetimes of meaning are exchanged in an instant, mind to mind, essence to essence. Psychologists have noted that those who experience NDES often return deeply transformed. Their fear of death diminishes, sometimes disappearing entirely. Their values shift. Material success becomes less important, and compassion, empathy, and connection rise to the forefront. They speak of a new sense of purpose, of clarity. Some even develop what they describe as heightened sensitivity, an intuitive awareness of life's interconnection. What's fascinating is how these transformations mirror descriptions from ancient spiritual traditions. Mystics throughout history, from Buddhist monks to Christian saints, from Sufi poets to indigenous shamans, have spoken of transcendent states that sound almost identical to modern NDE. A journey through light, union with the divine presence, and a return to earthly life with renewed wisdom. Could it be that the near-death experience is a universal human event, one that religions have interpreted through their own cultural lenses? In Buddhist teachings, for example, there is the concept of the bardo, an intermediate realm between death and rebirth, where consciousness experiences visions shaped by its own mind. Tibetan monks describe luminous beings, tunnels of light, and feelings of liberation, imagery strikingly similar to what modern experiences describe. In Christianity too, the imagery aligns. Walking into the light, meeting angels, seeing God's presence, all mirror the reports of people who have returned from death's edge. Even in ancient Egyptian texts, the soul's journey through darkness toward light is central to the passage into eternity. Could these similarities mean that the near-death experience reveals something fundamental about human consciousness? Something not bound by culture or biology? Or are they the result of the universal structure of the brain, reacting in similar ways under the extreme conditions of death? Scientists continue to debate. Some neuroscientists point to temporal lobe activity, oxygen deprivation, and surges of neurotransmitters as possible causes. Yet, as we've seen, the dying brain exhibits bursts of gamma activity that resemble conscious awareness, not the random noise one might expect from a failing organ. Others have proposed that consciousness might not be entirely produced by the brain, but rather filtered through it, like light passing through a prism. In this view, when the brain ceases to function, the filter dissolves, allowing awareness to expand beyond the limits of physical perception. It's a radical idea, but one gaining traction in certain fields of consciousness research. There are also the so-called shared death experiences, where people who are not dying, but are near someone who is, report glimpsing the same phenomena: the light, the tunnel, or the sense of presence as the loved one passes. These shared experiences suggest that something larger than an isolated brain process might be occurring, something that connects consciousness across boundaries. Let's pause and imagine what such an experience might feel like. You've left your body. The world below seems distant, dim, almost unreal. A soft hum surrounds you, not sound but vibration. Ahead, a glow beckons, not harsh, but gentle, like the first light of dawn after a long night. As you move closer, the light expands, filling everything. There is no more body, no more thought, only awareness. You realize that everything you've ever loved still exists, not as memory, but as essence. You're part of it. You've always been part of it. Then perhaps you hear a voice, familiar, comforting. It tells you it's not your time, and like a tide reversing, you're pulled back through the tunnel, through darkness, through the walls of your body. Suddenly you wake, gasping, back in the world of breath and heartbeat, back in the body you'd briefly left behind. When you open your eyes, everything feels different. Colours seem brighter. Time feels slower. Every heartbeat feels precious. This too is what many describe To scientists, these reports pose one of the greatest puzzles in the study of mind. How can the brain, with no measurable activity, generate such coherent experiences? And why do they feel more real than waking life? Some researchers, like Dr. Bruce Grayson, one of the world's leading NDE scholars, argue that whatever is happening, it reveals something extraordinary about consciousness itself. Grayson once said, "If NDEs are just illusions, they're illusions far richer and more organized than any dream, hallucination, or drug state we've ever studied." Perhaps then, NDEs point us toward a deeper truth, that consciousness in its purest form might not depend entirely on a physical brain. Maybe it's fundamental, like space, time, or energy. As we continue our journey, remember, this chapter is not about proving or disproving the afterlife. It's about exploring the mysteries that emerge when consciousness is pushed to its limits, and what those mysteries might reveal about who or what we truly are. For the people who've been there and returned, death is no longer something to fear. They speak of it not as an end, but as a transition, a homecoming, a remembering. And whether these experiences arise from neural activity or from something beyond the material world, they carry a message that echoes across every culture and century, that life and consciousness might be far larger than we can yet comprehend. So, as you lie here listening, calm, breathing softly, imagine the horizon beyond the horizon, a space not of endings but of continuity, not of darkness but of light. And perhaps, just perhaps, the near-death experience is not a glimpse of what comes after, but a reflection of the boundless nature of consciousness itself, the infinite ocean from which we all arise, and to which, one day, we may return. In the next chapter, we will explore the philosophical and spiritual interpretations of death, how ancient civilizations, modern thinkers, and contemporary science have all tried to make sense of the afterlife. We'll wander through the beliefs of the ancients, the speculations of philosophers, and the insights of mystics, tracing humanity's timeless attempt to answer the question, if consciousness survives death, what exactly continues? Chapter 5. Out-of-body awareness. Can consciousness leave the brain? Let's take a slow breath together. In and out. The air around you feels still, the world quiets into a soft hum, and your awareness begins to drift, a little lighter, a little freer. Tonight, we continue our journey, deeper into the most mysterious question of all. Can consciousness exist beyond the brain? For centuries, the human mind has been described as something encased within the skull, an orchestra of neurons, chemical reactions, and electrical impulses. But what if that orchestra can play beyond its physical stage? What if awareness, you, the silent observer, can, under certain conditions, detach from the brain entirely? Across the world, in countless hospitals, battlefields, and near-death accounts, people have described a remarkable event, the out-of-body experience. These are moments when the boundaries of the physical self dissolve. A person feels themselves rise, hover, and observe their own body from an external point of view. They see doctors performing CPR, hear conversations that occur while their body lies motionless, sometimes even travel beyond the room, into hallways, rooftops, or distant places. Such experiences have been reported for as long as human history has been recorded. Ancient shamans spoke of soul flight. The Egyptians depicted the ka, the double of the self, hovering above the body. In Greek philosophy, Plato wrote of the soul's ability to transcend the body's limits. And in modern hospitals, doctors have recorded cases that seem to echo these same ancient claims. Let's step gently into one such story. In 2008, a woman named Pam Reynolds underwent a rare brain surgery called hypothermic cardiac arrest, a procedure that required her body to be cooled to the point where her heartbeat, breathing and brain activity completely stopped. She was clinically dead for about an hour. When she awoke, her story stunned her surgeons. Pam described floating above the operating table, watching as her body lay still, and doctors worked on her skull. She recalled hearing a specific conversation between the surgical team, noted the shape and colour of the instruments, and even described the sound of the electric saw, a detail she shouldn't have been able to perceive since her ears were blocked and her brain showed no activity on the EEG. Later, every detail she recounted matched exactly what the surgical team confirmed. Now, skeptics have offered explanations. Perhaps her brain retained residual activity, or her mind reconstructed the experience afterward. But the question remains, how could she perceive details that occurred while her cortex, the seat of awareness, was flatlined? This is not an isolated case. In controlled hospital studies, researchers have tried to test these claims under scientific conditions. The most famous of these is the AWARE study, led by Dr. Sam Parnia. In participating hospitals, researchers placed hidden images on high shelves, visible only from above, to test whether patients reporting out-of-body awareness during cardiac arrest could identify them. While few results were conclusive, one patient accurately described events in the room during a 3-minute period of cardiac arrest, a time when his brain showed no measurable activity. He later recounted not only seeing his body, but hearing the automated defibrillator's distinct beeps, and even described the sequence of interventions. Dr. Parnia, cautious but intrigued, said, "This may suggest that consciousness is not annihilated at death. Rather, it may persist for some time after the body shuts down. To understand what might be happening, let's pause and imagine the mechanics of consciousness as we currently know them. The brain is often compared to a computer, a processing system that creates our sense of self by integrating sensory input, memory, and emotion. But what if it's not the creator of consciousness, but rather the receiver? Imagine your brain as a radio, tuned to the frequency of your awareness. The signal, your consciousness, is not inside the radio itself, but flows through it. When the radio breaks, the signal doesn't vanish. It simply moves beyond our capacity to receive it. This receiver hypothesis is not new. In the early 20th century, thinkers like William James and Henry Bergson proposed that the brain might filter, not produce, consciousness. More recently, neuroscientist Carl Pribram and physicist David Bohm suggested that the mind might operate within a larger holographic field, a kind of universal consciousness, of which our individual awareness is just a localized expression. If this idea holds truth, then out-of-body experiences could represent moments when that localized awareness momentarily expands beyond the physical vessel, perceiving reality from a different point in space, or even beyond it. But science continues to wrestle with this possibility. Controlled experiments have shown that out-of-body experiences can also be induced. In 2007, neuroscientist Olaf Blanke at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne discovered that by stimulating specific regions of the brain's temporal and parietal junction, he could trigger sensations of floating or seeing one's own body from above. This discovery suggests that the brain can simulate these experiences internally. However, there's a profound distinction between simulation and perception. Artificial stimulation can replicate the feeling of an out-of-body experience, but it doesn't account for verified perceptions. Instances where individuals report details from locations they could not physically access. So, are these experiences evidence of consciousness detaching from the body, or are they vivid hallucinations arising from a brain under stress? The answer may be more complex. Perhaps both are true in different ways. Consider this. Every night when you dream, your consciousness detaches from physical reality. You inhabit a world that feels real, yet is entirely generated by the mind. When you awaken, you realize it was all within. But what if certain moments, like near-death states, blur that boundary? What if, under extreme conditions, the mind is capable of perceiving not just an inner world, but an outer, non-local one as well? Let's step back into history for a moment. In many indigenous cultures, the ability to leave one's body was considered a gift. Shamans were believed to journey into other realms, bringing back knowledge, healing, or guidance. In ancient Greece, the philosopher Heraclitus wrote that the soul is its own light. In Hinduism, the subtle body, the sukshma sharira, was said to travel during sleep or at death, observing realms beyond the physical. These traditions all speak of consciousness as something fluid, not fixed within flesh. Even modern astronauts have reported similar sensations. When orbiting the Earth, some describe feeling an overwhelming sense of unity, of being detached from the body and yet deeply connected to everything. It's called the overview effect, a profound cognitive shift triggered by witnessing Earth from above. While not a literal out-of-body experience, it hints at the same essence, consciousness expanding beyond its usual boundaries. Imagine now, for a moment, your awareness gently rising. The weight of the body fades. You see yourself below, resting, breathing. The air feels soft, the light around you warm and weightless. The boundaries between you and the room dissolve until all that remains is the silent awareness of being, vast, limitless, and peaceful. This imagery mirrors countless descriptions of what people experience during out-of-body moments. There is no fear, only observation, only presence. And perhaps that's the key: presence. When you observe without attachment, you're no longer bound by the narrow focus of the physical senses. You become a witness, something beyond the brain, beyond the heartbeat, beyond the fragile container of flesh. Philosophically, this leads us into deep questions. If consciousness can exist independent of the body, even for moments, what does that say about who we are? Are we temporary beings housed in biological machinery, or eternal awareness temporarily localized within it? Some quantum physicists, like the late Sir Roger Penrose, speculated that consciousness might arise from quantum processes within the brain's microtubules, suggesting that awareness itself could exist as a quantum state, capable of persisting beyond physical death. Though controversial, the idea aligns intriguingly with reports of consciousness detaching from the body. Meanwhile, studies from the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, led by Dr. Bruce Grayson and Dr. Ian Stevenson, continue to investigate not just near-death and out-of-body experiences, but cases of children recalling verifiable details from past lives. The data may not prove consciousness leaves the body, but it hints that awareness might not be confined to it either. When viewed this way, death may not be an abrupt end, but a transition, like a wave receding back into the ocean from which it came. The body dissolves, but the awareness that once animated it continues, flowing back into the greater field of consciousness that underlies reality itself. Even those who do not subscribe to metaphysical explanations can find meaning here, because at its heart, the out-of-body experience reminds us that we are not our bodies. We are the awareness that inhabits them. The body is our home, our instrument, our vessel, but not our identity. And perhaps this understanding is what the ancients were trying to tell us all along, that life is not a linear journey from birth to death, but a cyclical dance of awareness, moving in and out of form like breath. So as you listen to these words, allow yourself to imagine that you're not confined to where you sit or lie right now. Imagine that you could rise gently, drift upward, and see the world below from a higher vantage point. Calm, silent, infinite. There is no fear here, only peace. Only the quiet understanding that what you truly are cannot be held, confined, or destroyed. When people return from such experiences, they often describe a new perspective. They live more deeply. They cherish the ordinary moments, the scent of rain, the laughter of a friend, the rhythm of their own heartbeat. Because once you've seen yourself from outside the body, you begin to understand that life is not something that happens to you. It is something you are. And maybe in that realization the line between living and dying begins to fade, not as a loss, but as an awakening. Chapter 6. The hard problem. What is consciousness really? Take a slow breath. Let it fill your lungs gently and exhale. The space around you grows quiet again. Perhaps you feel a soft awareness behind your eyes, the subtle pulse of thought, the hum of life within your body. You are here, listening, breathing, aware. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, what is this awareness? It is the most intimate thing you know, closer than your breath, older than your memories. It watches everything. The rise and fall of emotions, the flow of time, the quiet flicker of the world within you. And yet, no one can truly define it. This, dear listener, is the greatest puzzle of existence, the mystery at the center of all mysteries. The one question that humbles both philosopher and physicist alike: what is consciousness? For centuries we've explored the universe, mapped stars, split atoms, engineered artificial minds, and yet we still cannot explain the experience of being alive. We can describe neurons firing, measure electrical activity in the brain, even identify regions responsible for emotion, memory, or vision. But science still cannot explain why it feels like something to be you. This dilemma was named the hard problem of consciousness by the philosopher David Chalmers in the 1990s. He called it hard because, unlike the easy problems of explaining brain function, memory, behavior, perception, the hard problem asks why all this activity results in subjective experience. Why do we feel joy, sorrow, pain, or wonder? Why is there something it's like to be human, or a bat, or even a single neuron? Let's imagine the brain as a city, billions of neurons, each flashing and communicating in intricate patterns, like lights in a vast metropolis. Science can track the traffic, map the streets, and analyze the flow. But it cannot yet explain who is watching from above, experiencing the whole. When you taste chocolate, your brain releases certain chemicals, but the flavor, the rich sensation of sweetness and memory intertwined, that's not something you can measure. When you see the color blue, your eyes convert light into signals, but the feeling of blueness, calm, endless, oceanic, exist only within your awareness. So what is awareness? Materialism, the dominant scientific view, tells us that consciousness emerges from complex arrangements of matter. In other words, once the brain becomes sophisticated enough, awareness somehow arises as a byproduct. Like steam from boiling water, consciousness is seen as a side effect of neural computation. But this view raises deep paradoxes. How can unconscious particles, atoms, molecules, electrons, combine to produce a subjective inner world? How does mere physical structure give rise to experience? To bridge that gap, scientists have proposed models. One is Integrated Information Theory, YIT, developed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi. It suggests that consciousness corresponds to the degree of interconnectedness within a system, how much information it can integrate as a unified whole. The more integrated the system, the richer the consciousness. In this framework, even simple systems, like a single cell, might have a faint glimmer of awareness, a minimal form of experience. Another model is global workspace theory, which describes consciousness as a theatre of the mind. In the brain, countless unconscious processes work in the background, but only some make it to the stage of awareness, illuminated by attention and broadcast to the rest of the system. You, as the observer, are the audience watching this inner play unfold. But even these theories, elegant as they are, describe how consciousness might operate, not what it truly is. Some scientists, frustrated by material explanations, have turned the question on its head. Instead of trying to explain consciousness as an emergent property of matter, they ask, what if consciousness is fundamental, the very ground from which matter arises? This idea, known as panpsychism, suggests that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but is an intrinsic feature of reality, like space, time, or energy. In this view, every particle of existence contains a seed of awareness. When organized into complex forms, these seeds combine into richer forms of experience, just as individual drops of water merge to form the ocean. It's a radical thought, but it solves one key problem. If consciousness is already present at the foundation of reality, then we no longer need to explain how matter creates it, only how it organizes it. In ancient traditions, this was not new at all. Hindu philosophy, for instance, speaks of Brahman, the universal consciousness from which all things emerge. The Upanishads describe the individual soul, Atman, as not separate from the cosmic mind, but as its reflection. Thou art that, they say. Buddhism too points toward emptiness, not as nothingness, but as a field of pure awareness in which all phenomena appear and dissolve. In the West, similar ideas have surfaced in idealist philosophy. Thinkers like George Berkeley argue that the physical world exists only as perception, that to be is to be perceived. In the 20th century, physicist Erwin Schrödinger, co-founder of quantum theory, wrote, "Consciousness is a singular of which the plural is unknown, meaning there is only one consciousness and we are its many expressions." This shifts our question entirely. Instead of asking, how does the brain make consciousness, we begin to ask, how does consciousness make the brain and the world? Let's pause for a moment and imagine this possibility. Imagine that everything around you, the chair you sit on, the sound of your breath, the memory of a loved one, is made not of matter, but of awareness taking form. The universe itself could be thought of as a vast dream, not a random hallucination, but a coherent dream dreamed by consciousness itself. You are both the dreamer and the dream. The body and brain are part of the dream structure, instruments through which consciousness experiences itself. This may sound poetic, but even modern physics leaves room for such an idea. The deeper we probe into matter, the less we find things, and the more we find relationships, probabilities, and waves of potential. Reality, at its core, behaves less like solid substance and more like information, or thought. Could it be, then, that consciousness is not in the brain, but the brain is in consciousness? Some evidence points in this direction. Studies on patients under anesthesia, or those in deep comas, have shown that consciousness can sometimes persist even when measurable brain activity is nearly absent. Similarly, in near-death experiences, as we explored earlier, awareness seems to continue beyond the physical boundaries of the body. This brings us to a deeper question. What is the relationship between consciousness and physical reality? One possible answer lies in quantum mechanics, where the act of observation appears to influence the outcome of experiments. In the famous double-slit experiment, particles behave differently depending on whether they're being observed. suggesting that awareness and reality are mysteriously entangled. Some interpretations even propose that the universe itself is fundamentally participatory, that without consciousness, there is no definite reality. If this is true, then the mind does not merely observe the universe, it co-creates it. Your consciousness right now is part of the universe observing itself, folding back upon its own existence like a mirror reflecting a mirror. But let's come back to you, the listener, lying there in quiet reflection. You might ask, if consciousness is everywhere, why do I feel separate? Why do I seem like one small mind among billions? That question may hold the very essence of our human experience. Perhaps consciousness, infinite and formless, limits itself temporarily, focusing its vast awareness into a single point so it can experience individuality, sensation, learning, and growth. Like the ocean taking shape as a single wave, it forgets its boundless nature, only to one day remember. This forgetting and remembering might be what we call life and death. Life, the focus of consciousness into form. Death, its release back into the infinite field. If so, then understanding consciousness is not merely an intellectual challenge. It is a doorway to understanding what we truly are. Not machines made of matter, but awareness exploring itself through experience. And this awareness, your awareness, is the one constant through all changes. Bodies age, thoughts shift, emotions rise and fall, but the one who witnesses them remains the same. That silent witness behind your eyes, that's the mystery every scientist is trying to explain and every mystic is trying to remember. So perhaps the hard problem of consciousness cannot be solved by logic alone, because consciousness is not a problem to be solved, but the very ground from which solutions arise. As we move forward, hold this thought gently in your mind. If consciousness is the fundamental essence of reality, then death, the end of the body and brain, might not be an ending at all. It may simply be consciousness changing form, moving from one expression to another, like light passing through a prism. In our next chapter, we'll step into the realm where physics, information, and immortality intertwine, exploring the strange idea that information never truly dies. So, breathe softly, let the thoughts settle, like moonlight over still water, and prepare to journey deeper into the mystery of what it means to exist beyond death. Chapter 7. Information Never Dies. The Physics of Immortality. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this: the night sky above you, infinite and alive. Every star is a pulse of ancient light, crossing billions of years just to meet your gaze. That light, the shimmer of energy born from a dying star, has travelled through the dark untouched, unbroken. Though the star itself may have vanished eons ago, its information still lives on. Now, think about this. Could the same be true for you? Science tells us that information, the arrangement of things, the way matter and energy interact, cannot truly be destroyed. This is not just poetic philosophy, it is one of the most fundamental principles in physics. According to the law of conservation of information, everything that happens in the universe leaves a trace, a pattern that never fully disappears. Even when matter burns, dissolves, or collapses into a black hole, the information about what it once was doesn't vanish. It transforms, hidden in subtle ways that the universe remembers. This idea, that information persists, lies at the heart of what some physicists call the physics of immortality. Not immortality in the sense of living forever as a body or personality, but in the sense that the essence of who you are, the unique pattern of your consciousness and existence, can never truly be erased. Let's begin with something tangible, the body. Your body is a vast, living system of information. Every cell carries the story of your genetic code. Every thought is a dance of electrical impulses and chemical flows. When you breathe, when you dream, when you love, these are informational exchanges between you and the universe. And though your physical form changes constantly, the pattern, the organization of matter that is you, holds steady. After death, that pattern disperses. Your atoms return to the earth, your energy to the cosmos, but in doing so, they continue their story. The carbon in your bones may one day feed a forest. The heat of your body radiates outward, blending with the air, the stars, the silent hum of existence. Nothing is truly lost. It only changes form. But the deeper question remains, what happens to the information of your mind? The intricate, invisible code that gives rise to memory, emotion, and awareness. For centuries, scientists believe that when the brain dies, that information is gone forever. But the more we've learned about physics, the less certain that assumption becomes. Let's travel to the strange edge of reality, the world of quantum mechanics, where the rules of logic begin to dissolve. In the quantum realm, information behaves in mysterious ways. Particles exist in multiple states at once, connected across vast distances in a phenomenon known as entanglement. When one particle changes, its twin, no matter how far away, responds instantly, as if the universe itself were woven from an invisible thread of shared knowing. Physicists like John Archibald Wheeler, a mentor to many of the great minds of the 20th century, proposed that the universe is not made of matter, but of information itself. He called it the it from bit principle, meaning that every it, every atom, every event, every galaxy arises from fundamental bits of information. In this view, reality is not a machine, but a cosmic computation, a vast flow of informational processes unfolding in time. And if that's true, then you, your consciousness, your memories, your life are part of that ongoing computation, a unique expression of the universe's infinite information field. But what happens when you die? Does your information simply dissolve into randomness, or could it somehow persist in the structure of reality itself? To explore this, we turn to one of the most mysterious places in the cosmos, the black hole. Black holes are regions where gravity is so intense that nothing, not even light, can escape. For a long time, physicists believed that anything falling into a black hole was lost forever. Matter, energy, information, all swallowed by the void. But that belief led to a paradox. If information truly disappeared, it would violate the most sacred law of physics. That information is never destroyed. This became known as the black hole information paradox, and it haunted scientists for decades. Then came Stephen Hawking. In the 1970s, Hawking discovered that black holes aren't completely black. They emit a faint glow, now called Hawking radiation. Over time, this radiation causes black holes to evaporate. But here's the twist. If the radiation carries even the smallest imprint of the information inside, then nothing is truly lost. It just transforms. Later studies, from string theory to quantum gravity, began to support this idea. The information about everything that falls into a black hole might be stored not inside it, but on its surface, in a thin, two-dimensional layer known as the event horizon. In other words, the information isn't destroyed, it's encoded on the edge of space itself. From this, physicists propose something revolutionary, that the entire universe might work the same way. This is the holographic principle, the idea that all the information within our three-dimensional reality is actually stored on a distant two-dimensional boundary, like a cosmic hologram. If this is true, then everything that has ever existed, every thought, every emotion, every heartbeat, is imprinted somewhere in the structure of the universe. The stars, the oceans, the laughter of children, the whisper of your name, all encoded in the infinite fabric of space-time. In a way, the universe remembers you, and perhaps that remembrance is a kind of immortality. Not the survival of the ego, but the persistence of your pattern, your informational fingerprint within the eternal flow of existence. Now let's descend from the cosmic scale back into the quiet depths of human consciousness. Some researchers have begun exploring whether the brain itself might operate partly as a quantum system, using subtle entanglements to store and process information beyond classical limits. The orchestrated objective reduction theory, proposed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, suggests that consciousness might emerge from quantum events within the microtubules of brain cells. If so, the information of your awareness could, in principle, interact with the quantum field of the universe and possibly endure beyond physical death. Even if this theory remains controversial, it aligns with something many mystics and near-death experiencers have long described, that consciousness, upon death, expands outward, merging with a greater field of awareness as though rejoining a universal memory. But let's step back for a moment. Beyond physics, beyond speculation, what does it mean for information never to die? It means that every choice you make, every kindness you offer, every thought that ripples through your mind, all of it becomes part of the story of the universe. The universe records not in books or data, but in being itself. Your existence is not fleeting. It's woven into the grand pattern of reality, into the mathematics of creation. The photons that reflect off your face may journey across galaxies one day. The atoms that compose your hand once lived in the heart of a star. And when your body returns to dust, those same atoms will move on to form new stars, new worlds, new lives. The story continues. There's a strange comfort in knowing that the universe wastes nothing. Even in endings, it is creating beginnings. Even in death, it is recycling life. So perhaps immortality is not about escaping death, but understanding that death itself is an illusion, a transformation of form, not of essence. As the physicist and philosopher Heinz Pagels once said, the universe is not a dying machine, but a living mind. If consciousness and information are one and the same, then you, as consciousness, are part of something that never truly ceases to exist. When you die, the pattern shifts. The song continues in a different key. Your melody becomes part of the cosmic symphony, one note in an eternal harmony. So maybe the afterlife isn't somewhere else. Maybe it's here, in the way information flows through every atom of the universe, in the way the past whispers through the stars, in the way awareness never fades but only transforms. Take a moment now, breathe, and let that idea settle. You are not merely matter. You're not a collection of neurons waiting to fade. You are information, luminous, self-aware, eternal, and that information, your pattern in the great field of existence, will never be lost. It may change, evolve, transcend, but it will always remain a part of the whole, because in the deepest physics there is no true death, only transformation, no endings, only continuity. And if consciousness is indeed woven into the structure of the universe, then in some mysterious way you have always existed, and you always will. As we move into the next chapter, we will dive into what this means for the self. If consciousness and information are eternal, what happens to the you that you believe yourself to be? Is the self something real, or is it merely another pattern, a temporary wave on the surface of the infinite ocean of awareness? Take another slow breath. Feel the stillness beneath the thought, and let us continue deeper. Chapter 8: Quantum Reality. Is death an illusion? Hey guys, tonight we drift deeper into the mystery. The lights of the waking world grow dim now, and before us opens an endless ocean, the quantum sea, where the rules of reality as we know them begin to dissolve. Here, on the border between science and the unknowable, we find ourselves faced with a breathtaking possibility: that death, the one thing we've always believed to be final, might not be an ending at all. So, get comfortable. Let the day slip away. Feel your breath slow down as we step softly into the dreamlike realm of quantum reality, a place where everything is connected and nothing ever truly disappears. If we zoom far enough into the structure of existence, beyond the atoms, beyond the protons, down into the subatomic world, what we find isn't solid matter. It's vibration, it's possibility, it's information in motion. At this level, the universe behaves in ways that defy the logic of everyday life. Particles vanish and reappear. They can exist in multiple places at once. They can communicate instantly across vast distances, no matter how far apart they are. This strange behavior is governed by the laws of quantum mechanics, a branch of physics that describes how reality behaves on the smallest scales. For over a century, it has been the most successful theory in all of science, and also the most confusing. Because it doesn't just describe the world we live in, it challenges the very nature of what living and dying might mean. At the quantum level, the clear boundary between life and death, between being and not being, begins to blur. Let's start with one of the most profound discoveries in all of physics: quantum entanglement. When two particles interact, they can become entangled, meaning that their properties are forever linked. If you change one, the other changes instantly, even if they are light years apart. Albert Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, because it seemed to defy everything we know about space, time, and causality. But what does this have to do with death? Well, if the particles that make up our bodies, our neurons, our atoms, our very being, are part of this entangled web, then perhaps nothing is ever truly isolated or lost. The death of the body may not be the death of its information. The pattern, the quantum state, the entanglement, could still persist, interwoven into the greater field of reality. Think of it this way. When a wave disappears into the ocean, has it really ended? Or has it simply merged with something vast and continuous? Another key to this mystery lies in what's called the observer effect. In the quantum world, things don't seem to exist in a definite state until they are observed. A particle exists as a cloud of probabilities, a wave of potential outcomes, until someone measures it. The act of observation collapses that wave into a specific reality. This is not just a metaphor, it's a verified phenomenon, demonstrated again and again in laboratories. The simple act of observing changes the outcome. Now pause and think about that. Reality itself, the unfolding of matter, the shaping of form, depends on observation, on consciousness. This raises a staggering question. If observation shapes reality, what happens to reality when the observer, when you, dies? Some physicists and philosophers have speculated that consciousness may not merely be a byproduct of the universe, but a fundamental part of it. That awareness might actually create the fabric of what we call existence. If this is true, then when you die, the observer doesn't vanish, it transforms. The stream of awareness may shift perspective, expanding beyond the limited window of the human body into the vast, boundless field from which all experience arises, In this view, death could simply be the dissolution of one perspective. Not the end of consciousness, but the end of the illusion of separation. To explore this further, let's step into one of the most fascinating theories in modern physics, the many worlds interpretation, first proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. Everett suggested that every possible outcome of every event doesn't just exist as potential, it actually happens in separate parallel universes. When you make a choice, the universe splits, creating multiple realities, one where you chose one path, another where you chose another. According to this view, the universe is constantly branching, endlessly multiplying. Every version of you, every possible life you could live, exists somewhere in this infinite cosmic tapestry. Now, imagine applying this to death. In the moment that your body ceases in one universe, there might exist another branch, another version of reality, in which you continue. To you, subjectively, consciousness never ends. You simply find yourself in another timeline, unaware that any death occurred at all. It's an idea known as quantum immortality. Though deeply theoretical and impossible to prove, it offers a mind-bending possibility that death might be a local event, something that happens in one branch of the multiverse, but not to the consciousness that experiences it. From your point of view, you might just continue to wake up, always, eternally, somewhere else. It's not immortality in the traditional sense, but continuity across infinite versions of reality. A seamless unfolding of awareness through endless probabilities. Now, this doesn't mean that you, as your current personality or memory, would go on forever. In some interpretations, the you that continues is not the same as the you that once was, but a new expression of the same conscious field, like one flame lighting another, the same fire burning through different candles. Still, it challenges the very core of our understanding of existence. Because if every possible reality exists simultaneously, then the idea of a permanent end, of nothingness, may be impossible. But let's bring this vast cosmic speculation closer to something we can feel. Imagine you're lying on your bed, eyes closed. You drift into sleep. To the outside world, your body is still. Your breathing slows. Your mind slips away from the physical room. And yet, to you, something continues. The dream begins. You find yourself walking down a familiar street or floating through the sky. To you, it feels as real as waking life. Then, when you wake up, that dream world vanishes completely, gone from sight, yet somehow remembered. Now imagine death as a similar transition. From the perspective of the living, the body lies still. The biological systems stop. But from the perspective of consciousness, the dreamer behind the dream, perhaps something else begins. A transition into another layer of reality, another expression of the quantum field. Could death, like sleep, simply be a passage, a shift in the frequency of perception? Let's look at the evidence from another angle. Quantum physics teaches us that matter and energy are not separate. What we perceive as solid objects are actually vibrating fields of energy, constantly exchanging information with their surroundings. You're not isolated from the universe. You are the universe, temporarily organized into a human pattern. When the pattern dissolves, the energy doesn't vanish, it flows back into the field. The physicist Erwin Schrödinger, one of the fathers of quantum mechanics, once said, "Consciousness is a singular of which the plural is unknown. In other words, there is only one consciousness, appearing as many. We are like waves on the same sea, each unique in form, but all part of the same vast ocean of awareness. If that's true, then when you die, you don't lose consciousness. You return to the larger consciousness from which you were never truly separate. Death becomes the falling of a single wave back into the sea, a merging not an ending. There's a beautiful story that helps to capture this idea. A Zen master once asked his students, "Where does the flame go when you blow out the candle?" The students thought for a moment. Some said, "It disappears." Others said, "It dies." But the master smiled gently and said, "It goes back to the fire." Just as the flame doesn't die but returns to its source, so too may consciousness, upon death, return to the greater fire of being, the quantum field of existence that burns eternally. So, when we ask, is death an illusion? The answer may be deeper than we can comprehend. From the perspective of quantum physics, there may be no such thing as non-existence. Every possibility that can exist does exist, somewhere, somehow in the infinite branching of reality. And if consciousness is part of that structure, not an accident, but a fundamental aspect of the cosmos, then it may never be truly extinguished. Perhaps what we call death is simply the closing of one window and the opening of another. The same awareness, now looking through a new frame. Take a slow, deep breath, in and out. The night is vast. The stars above you are the same particles that once lived in ancient suns, reborn as the light that touches your eyes now. And one day, that light and the awareness that beholds it will merge again with the infinite. The physicist David Bohm described the universe as a hollow movement, an undivided wholeness in constant motion. Life and death are not opposites within this flow. They're complementary states, each giving meaning to the other. You're not a separate observer looking at reality. You're reality looking at itself. And when the observer fades from one form, it reappears in another, endlessly, beautifully, eternally. As we move into the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when we take this quantum understanding of reality and apply it to time itself, that mysterious dimension through which all existence unfolds. If time is not what it seems, could death be just a momentary illusion in an endless simultaneous now? Let's explore that together as we continue our quiet journey into the heart of reality. Chapter 9. Time, Memory, and the Eternal Now. Hey guys, tonight we drift deeper still. The noise of the waking world fades, and what remains is the soft rhythm of your breath, the quiet pulse of existence itself. Let your body relax completely. Let the thoughts of the day dissolve like waves returning to the sea. As we move further into this journey, we will explore one of the most mysterious dimensions of all, time itself, the silent current that carries us from birth to death, from moments remembered to moments yet to come. But what if time isn't what we think it is? What if, just like death, time too is an illusion? Time feels like a river. It flows, always in one direction, forward. We remember the past, we live in the present, and we anticipate the future. Everything we do, every heartbeat, every story, seems to unfold along this invisible line. Yet for centuries, both science and philosophy have whispered another truth, that time may not truly flow at all, that past, present, and future all coexist eternally. We just experience them sequentially, as if reading one page of an infinite book at a time. Let's imagine this together. Picture yourself standing in a vast library. Each book on the shelves is a moment in time. One for your birth, one for this very instant, one for your final breath. You walk along the shelves, opening one book after another, reading each page as if it's happening now. To you, the story unfolds in sequence, but to the library, to the universe, all of those moments already exist. The pages don't vanish when you close them. They simply remain where they are, waiting to be read again. This is what physicists call the block universe, The idea that all points in time exist simultaneously, like a frozen landscape of events. In this model, the past doesn't go away, and the future isn't yet to be. They are simply different coordinates in the same four-dimensional fabric of space-time. From this perspective, nothing truly comes or goes. It only appears to change when viewed through the lens of consciousness. Albert Einstein hinted at this in a letter written after the death of a close friend. He said, "For us believing physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. To him, death was not a disappearance but a shift of position, the movement of consciousness within an eternal continuum." Think about that for a moment. If all of time exists at once, then your life, every laughter, every dream, every tear still exists right now, eternally recorded within the universe. The child you once were, the elder you may become, the moments you thought were lost, all of them still live within the grand tapestry of the cosmos. You have not truly left them, and they have not left you. They exist together, woven into the infinite fabric of the present. The human mind, however, is built to experience time as a sequence. Our consciousness moves like a flashlight in the dark, illuminating one moment at a time, giving the illusion of motion through the eternal now. It's as if we are travelers on a track, but the track itself, every step, every view, every turn, already exists. The ancient mystics, long before modern physics, also spoke of this. In many spiritual traditions, enlightenment is described as the realization that there is no before or after, only this moment, the eternal now. They said time is a dream of the mind, a veil drawn over the stillness that underlies all things. When we dream, we experience whole lifetimes in a few seconds. When we meditate deeply, time dissolves entirely. Minutes stretch into hours or vanish completely. Time bends under the weight of perception, reminding us that it may not be a constant, but a psychological construction, a tool consciousness uses to organize experience. Now think of near-death experiences, those profound moments when the boundaries between life and death blur. Many people who have returned from such experiences describe a sensation of timelessness. They say they saw their entire lives flash before their eyes, but not as a sequence, rather all at once. Every moment, every detail, every feeling, experienced simultaneously, like being inside the totality of their existence. From a neuroscientific perspective, the dying brain may release a cascade of gamma waves, intense bursts of neural activity, which compress memory into a single, overwhelming moment. But from a subjective perspective, it feels as though time itself collapses. There is no past or future, only awareness, infinite and still. Could it be that what we call the moment of death is the realization that there was never a timeline to begin with? That life and death are both expressions of one eternal consciousness, endlessly perceiving itself through different frames of experience? In this view, death is not the end of time, it is the end of linear time. It is the awakening into timelessness. Imagine it this way. When you're watching a movie, the story unfolds moment by moment, but on the reel, the entire story already exists, the beginning, the middle, and the end. You experience it in sequence, but the film itself is whole. Death is simply the moment the reel stops spinning, and you see the whole film at once. This concept is not just poetic, it's deeply embedded in modern physics. At the speed of a light, time stops altogether. For a photon traveling from a distant star to your eyes, there is no journey. From its perspective, it leaves and arrives at the same instant. Billions of years for you, but no time at all for the light. In a very real sense, the light that reaches you tonight from a star that died ages ago never truly travelled. It always existed here, now waiting to be seen. So, when you gaze at the stars, you're not looking into the past, you're touching eternity, the eternal now where all things coexist. This also redefines memory. We think of memory as a record of the past stored somewhere in the brain, but perhaps memory is not a storage system at all. Perhaps it is a resonance, a tuning into other points of the eternal now. Just as a radio can pick up different frequencies from the air, your consciousness might be capable of tuning into moments that already exist. When you remember, you're not replaying something gone. You're touching it again, directly. And dreams, too, might be glimpses of other coordinates in the field of consciousness, fragments of what is, was, or could be, rearranged by the mind's attempt to make meaning out of infinity. If this is true, then what we call the afterlife could be another coordinate in this timeless field, another layer of the eternal now, accessible when consciousness shifts beyond the narrow channel of the physical brain. The self you believe yourself to be, the story of your life, might continue to exist as a complete living pattern within the structure of reality, not gone, not erased, but simply resting in the stillness of eternity. To grasp this more deeply, take a moment and slow your breath. Feel the space between the inhale and the exhale. That pause, that stillness, is timeless. In that instant, you're not moving forward or backward, you simply are. That is the eternal now, the still point at the center of existence, where nothing is born and nothing dies. When great mystics and near-death experiencers describe becoming one with everything, what they are describing is that shift, the realization that all moments, all beings, all experiences are happening in a single unbroken field of consciousness. From that vantage, death is not a doorway, but a veil, and when it lifts, we see that there was never anywhere to go. The past and the future dissolve, and only this infinite moment remains. There is a quiet comfort in this. The ones you've lost are not truly gone. Their presence still exists within the eternal now, interwoven with your own. Every laugh you shared, every word, every touch, still rippling through the field of being. In that sense, memory is not remembrance, it is communion. And perhaps that is why love feels eternal, because it is the one force that transcends time. Love connects consciousness across the boundaries of birth and death, past and future. It is not an emotion, but a recognition of unity, a remembering of what was never divided. So maybe death doesn't end the story, because the story never truly began. It is always happening, always unfolding, always here. Take a deep breath now, and listen. Beneath the ticking of the clock, beneath the pulse of your own heartbeat, there is a silence, vast, eternal, and still. That silence is the real you, the timeless witness that has always been and always will be. And when the body fades, when time unravels, that silence remains, unchanged, unmoved, eternal. Perhaps this is what it means to live forever, not to persist endlessly through time, but to awaken to the truth that you are never inside time to begin with. You are the stillness in which time happens, and if that's true, then death is not the end of your story, it is the end of forgetting who you are. As we move into the next chapter, we will explore a question that has lingered in the hearts of humanity for millennia. If consciousness truly transcends death and time, could it return again? Could awareness re-enter the world, reborn in new forms, carrying echoes of what once was? Chapter 10: Reincarnation and the Continuity of Self. The night deepens. The mind begins to drift again, slowly loosening its grip on the waking world. In this quiet between breath and dream, we open a door into one of humanity's oldest and most haunting questions. What happens to consciousness after death? Does it vanish like smoke into the air? Or could it return again, taking new form, new body, new story? The idea of reincarnation has been whispered across ages and civilizations, from the ancient philosophies of India and Tibet to the mystic teachings of Pythagoras and Plato, to the quiet curiosity of modern science. Beneath different languages and beliefs lies a single intuition, that life is not a single spark that flares and dies, but part of a vast cycle, endlessly renewing itself. Imagine this: consciousness, like water, never destroyed but always changing form. A drop becomes a wave, the wave returns to the ocean, and from that ocean another drop rises again. So too might awareness dissolve into the infinite after death, only to emerge again in a new life, shaped but not entirely defined by what came before. The notion of reincarnation is more than mythology. It is an ancient map of the soul's journey. In Hindu philosophy, this cycle is called samsara, the endless turning of birth, death, and rebirth. It is said that the soul, or Atman, moves through countless lives, learning, evolving, and shedding ignorance until it realizes its unity with the ultimate reality, Brahman. In Buddhism, the cycle of rebirth is understood not as a soul traveling from body to body, but as a continuation of energy and consciousness, a flame lighting another flame. The self, they say, is an illusion, a temporary arrangement of perceptions and memories. Yet the karmic momentum of one life continues, carrying patterns, tendencies, and attachments into the next. And in ancient Greece, philosophers like Plato describe the soul as eternal, journeying through different realms to gain knowledge and purify itself. Even among early Christian mystics, there were whispers of pre-existence, the belief that souls lived before birth and would live again after death. Across time and culture, the story repeats: we are not born from nothing, nor do we vanish into it. We emerge, dissolve, and emerge again, like the tide. But what draws humanity to this idea? Perhaps it is because reincarnation answers both the mystery of death and the mystery of life. If death is not an end, then every life is part of a greater continuity, an unfolding story too vast to fit within a single lifetime. Consider for a moment how memory, emotion, and personality form. So much of who we are cannot be traced only to our biology or upbringing. Sometimes we feel drawn to certain places or eras for no reason we can name. Sometimes we carry unexplainable fears or affinities, as if echoes of another life whisper softly in the background of our consciousness. There have been documented cases that challenge even the most skeptical minds. Small children, barely able to form sentences, recalling vivid details of lives they couldn't possibly have known. Names, towns, faces, causes of death, verified later as real. In places like India, Lebanon, and the United States, such stories have been meticulously investigated by researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson and Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia. They found children who spoke languages they'd never heard, recognized people from distant towns, or described how they died in their previous lives with astonishing precision. Science, of course, remains cautious. These memories could have other explanations, coincidences, suggestibility, unconscious cues. Yet, even so, the evidence continues to stir questions that cannot be easily dismissed. And beyond those accounts, there are subtler clues. Some people, under deep hypnosis or past life regression therapy, report memories of other lives. They describe ancient landscapes, unfamiliar customs, and forgotten histories that sometimes align with archaeological reality. While these experiences may not prove reincarnation, they reveal how vast and layered the human mind truly is, capable of reaching beyond what it seems to remember. Modern science may not yet confirm the survival of consciousness, But even within its boundaries, new theories hint at deeper possibilities. Quantum physics, for example, suggests that consciousness may not arise from matter, but may be fundamental to the universe, woven into the very structure of reality. If consciousness is not produced by the brain but transmitted through it, like a signal through a receiver, then perhaps death merely changes the channel. And if that signal, that awareness, is eternal, then reincarnation could be a natural expression of its continuity. Life, then, would be a process of consciousness, exploring itself through countless forms, gathering experience, and evolving in awareness. In the Tibetan Bardo Thodol, known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, death is described as a passage through luminous realms of consciousness. The departing soul encounters visions shaped by its own mind, moments of clarity, terror, compassion, and attachment. If the soul recognizes the truth, that all these visions arise from its own nature, it attains liberation. But if it clings to fear or desire, it returns to the cycle of birth, drawn by the gravity of unfinished experience. From this view, rebirth is not punishment, but continuation, a compassionate opportunity for growth. Each life becomes a classroom where the soul learns through experience, slowly remembering its true essence. And perhaps this is why certain lessons seem to follow us. Patterns of behavior, recurring relationships, familiar struggles. The people we meet, the love we share, even the pain we endure, could be threads connecting lifetimes, weaving a single story across ages. Imagine for a moment that before each birth the soul pauses, like a traveller standing at the edge of a river, choosing where to step in next. It reviews the lessons it has learned and the ones it has yet to face. It may choose circumstances, challenges, or companions that will help it grow. And when it enters the world, it forgets, because to truly learn, it must begin again, without memory of the script. Life, then, becomes a form of sacred amnesia, the soul's way of rediscovering itself through limitation. If this is true, then perhaps what we call death is not a tragedy, but a turning of the page. The soul steps out of one story and into another, carrying the wisdom it has gathered, not as memory but as intuition, instinct, empathy. And if reincarnation is real, then every being we meet may have shared countless journeys with us before, as friend, stranger, parent, child. Life becomes a grand reunion, an intricate dance of souls weaving in and out of existence, bound not by time but by recognition. In this light, compassion takes on new meaning. To harm another would be to harm ourselves in another form. To forgive, to love, to understand. These acts become the essence of evolution itself. There's something deeply comforting in this view. It softens the fear of death and gives dignity to every life, no matter how brief or obscure. For even the smallest existence, the quietest soul, contributes to the eternal unfolding of consciousness. But reincarnation also challenges us. If we are eternal beings, then we are responsible for the worlds we create, the choices we make, the lessons we leave unfinished. Life becomes not a random accident, but a sacred opportunity, one that repeats until it is truly understood. And so, perhaps, death is not the end of you, nor even a transition into something wholly new. It is the continuation of a journey that never truly began and never truly ends, a spiral of becoming, guided by love, curiosity, and the timeless urge to awaken. As the night deepens and you drift closer to sleep, imagine your consciousness as a gentle flame, not bound to this life, nor limited by this body. It flickers through ages, changing form but never losing its light. Each lifetime, each dream, each moment is a single breath of that eternal fire. You're not only who you are now, Your every life you have ever been, every lesson you have learned, every kindness you have shown, every love you have felt, and you are also everything you are yet to become. Rest in that knowing that you are part of a vast continuum of existence, flowing endlessly through time and space, learning, growing, remembering. And as we move forward, the question deepens still. If consciousness can transcend life and death, if it moves between bodies, between worlds, then where does it come from in the first place? What is the source of awareness itself before birth, beyond time? In the next chapter, we will journey into that question, into the mystery of origin, to explore where consciousness truly begins, and whether it has ever truly begun at all. Chapter 11, The Holographic Universe, Consciousness as Projection. The night is quiet now. The stars above seem closer, shimmering faintly, as if the sky itself were a vast screen upon which existence is gently being projected. Every breath feels slower, deeper, as if the rhythm of the universe is breathing with you. And in this stillness, a strange idea begins to emerge, one that feels both ancient and astonishingly modern. What if the universe we live in is not as solid as it seems? What if reality itself is more like a grand hologram, a projection of something deeper, more unified, more infinite than our senses can perceive? This idea, known as the holographic universe, has quietly transformed how scientists, philosophers, and mystics think about existence. It suggests that everything we experience, every sound, every colour, every sensation of being alive, might be a three-dimensional image emerging from information encoded on a deeper two-dimensional field somewhere beyond what we can see. Imagine holding a holographic image, perhaps of a tree or a bird in flight. If you break that hologram into smaller pieces, each fragment still contains the whole image of the tree or bird, just at lower resolution. Each part contains the whole, and the whole is contained in each part. Now imagine that the universe itself works in much the same way, that every point in space and time carries within it the pattern of the entire cosmos, that you, sitting here in this quiet moment, are not separate from the stars above or the vast galaxies beyond them, but are a living expression of the same cosmic field, folded into awareness. This idea didn't begin as poetry or spiritual metaphor. It was born from physics. In the 1970s, physicists like Gerard T. Hooft and Leonard Susskind proposed the holographic principle to solve a deep paradox about black holes, those mysterious regions of space where gravity is so strong that not even light can escape. They discovered something strange. The information about everything that falls into a black hole doesn't vanish inside it as we once thought. Instead, it appears to be stored on the black hole's surface, the thin boundary around it, almost like data encoded on a holographic plate. If that's true for black holes, they asked, could it also be true for the entire universe? Could it be that our three-dimensional reality is actually a projection from the two-dimensional surface of cosmic information, a hologram generated by a deeper layer of reality we cannot directly perceive? It sounds abstract, but consider this. What we experience as physical reality is already a kind of projection. The colours you see, the sounds you hear, the sensations you feel are not things existing out there. They're interpretations created by your brain. Light waves have no colour, your mind paints them. Sound waves have no tone, your mind translates them. You never actually touch the world. You touch the signals your consciousness interprets. So perhaps, on some grander scale, reality itself functions the same way. The universe could be a vast information field projected into the theatre of awareness, and consciousness is the observer sitting in that theatre, watching the movie unfold. In this view, death does not mean the end of the projection. It means the observer shifts awareness to another layer of the hologram. But let's pause here and ask something deeper. If the universe is a hologram, who or what is the projector? Some philosophers suggest that consciousness itself, the infinite unbroken awareness underlying everything, is that projector. Every life, every star, every event in the universe could be a pattern of that one consciousness, expressing itself in different forms, like light, refracted through a prism. The prism creates many colours, but the light remains one. Mystics throughout history have described similar insights long before science hinted at them. The ancient Vedic texts of India said, "Brahman is the world, and the world is Brahman." The same idea that the universe and consciousness are not two separate things, but one and the same essence reflecting itself. Plato, centuries later, spoke of the world of forms, perfect, eternal patterns from which the physical world is only a shadow, a reflection. The holographic model resonates with these ancient intuitions. What we call reality may be a shadow of something far vaster and more fundamental. Even in mystical experiences reported during deep meditation, near-death states, or psychedelic journeys, people often describe a sudden realization that the physical world is only a thin veil, and behind it lies a radiant unity, an awareness that everything is interconnected, alive, and made of the same luminous field. To many, this feels not like an illusion in the sense of being false, but rather like a divine dream, an artistic projection of consciousness exploring itself through infinite diversity. In a holographic universe, individuality becomes a beautiful paradox. Each person feels separate, a distinct wave moving across the surface, yet each wave is made of the same oceanic consciousness. You and I, the trees and stars, the moments of love and sorrow, all ripples within one grand field of awareness, endlessly playing itself into form. And this has profound implications for how we understand death. If consciousness is not confined to the brain but is instead part of a universal field, then death may simply be the fading of one localized projection. The body ceases to display the image, but the information, the pattern of consciousness that was you, remains encoded in the fabric of the cosmos. Think of a hologram again. When the light source moves away, the image disappears, but the pattern itself, the encoded data, still exists on the holographic plate. Perhaps death is that moment when the light of individual awareness turns away, returning to the larger field, where the boundaries of self dissolve and the infinite remembers itself again. This may also explain why people who have near-death or mystical experiences often describe a sense of homecoming, as though they're reuniting with something vast, familiar and loving. They say things like, "I was everything and nothing," or "I understood that I had never truly been separate." In the holographic model, these descriptions make sense, because consciousness, stepping beyond the illusion of separation, perceives the full pattern once more. But the holographic principle also challenges something else, the idea that space and time are fixed and absolute. In this model, space and time may be emergent properties of deeper informational patterns. They are part of the projection, not the projector. This means that, in the most fundamental sense, there is no real before or after all moments exist simultaneously, encoded within the cosmic field. When people recall past lives, experience déjà vu, or feel connected to events far away, it may not be that their consciousness is travelling in time. It might be that they are accessing another layer of the holographic pattern, another part of the total image that has always been there. Reality, then, is not a line moving from birth to death. It's a sphere, containing all experiences at once, each one illuminated by consciousness when it chooses to focus upon it. Some researchers have even explored whether our brains might act like biological holographic receivers. The neuroscientist Carl Pribram once proposed that memory and perception are stored not as fixed locations in the brain, but as interference patterns, much like holograms, distributed across neural networks. This could explain why memories often persist even after parts of the brain are damaged, and why consciousness seems to function as a unified field rather than a collection of isolated processes. If Pribram was right, then the brain doesn't produce consciousness, it tunes into it, decoding patterns from the infinite holographic field of existence. Each mind would then be like a radio, receiving its own frequency of the same universal broadcast. And when the radio is switched off, when the body dies, the broadcast doesn't end. The signal continues, everywhere, eternal. This brings us to an even more profound realization. If consciousness is the projector and reality is its hologram, then death is not the loss of the self, but the return to the source. The individual image dissolves, but the light that created it remains. Imagine this as you drift deeper into rest. You are not a being moving through a universe. You are the universe, momentarily observing itself from one small perspective. Every star, every atom, every heartbeat is the same light, refracted into infinite form. Death, in this sense, is the merging of that light, the rejoining of the beam with the source that projected it. It's not an ending, but an unveiling. The moment the illusion of separation fades and the fullness of existence is seen for what it truly is, a seamless, infinite living field of awareness. And so, as the night continues and you sink deeper into calm, let this understanding settle quietly within you. You are not apart from anything. You have never truly been born, nor will you truly die. You are a reflection of the cosmic whole, and within you the entire universe is dreaming itself awake. When we awaken from that dream, what do we return to? If the holographic universe is a projection of a deeper consciousness, then perhaps all individual minds are fragments of a greater one, a collective awareness that binds every life together in ways we're only beginning to glimpse. As we move into the next chapter, we'll journey deeper into that shared dimension, into the vast ocean of consciousness that may connect all minds, all beings, across time and space. Chapter 12. The Collective Mind. Consciousness as a field. There's a stillness that comes in the deep of the night, a quiet so profound that you begin to feel as though the boundaries between you and the world have softened. The sound of your breath becomes the tide. The pulse in your chest seems to echo faintly in the rhythm of the earth itself. You start to sense something subtle, almost imperceptible, that maybe you're not thinking alone. From the earliest days of philosophy to the edges of modern neuroscience, thinkers have wondered whether consciousness might not be an isolated phenomenon contained within individual skulls, but something far more expansive, something shared, a field that connects all living beings, weaving them together like threads in an invisible web. This idea, the collective mind, is not new. It has appeared again and again, whispered through ancient spiritual texts and modern scientific theories alike. The great psychologist Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, a vast reservoir of shared human memory and archetype, the timeless patterns of experience that shape our dreams, myths, and instincts. To Jung, our personal mind is like an island, unique but surrounded by a vast sea of shared consciousness. Beneath our individual stories lies an ocean of symbols, emotions, and ancient wisdom, the sum of humanity's psychological evolution. But what if it doesn't end with humanity? What if the field of consciousness extends beyond species, beyond planets, beyond time itself? A universal awareness expressing itself through countless forms of life. Modern science, in its quiet way, has begun to stumble upon hints of this possibility. Studies in what's known as noetic science or global consciousness research have sought to measure the subtle interconnectedness between human minds. One of the most remarkable projects in this area is called the Global Consciousness Project, based at Princeton University. It began in the 1990s with an unusual experiment. Researchers placed random number generators, small electronic devices that produce completely unpredictable data, in dozens of locations around the world. Under normal circumstances, these devices spit out random sequences, much like flipping a coin repeatedly. But during moments of collective emotion, world-shifting events such as natural disasters, celebrations or tragedies, the randomness seemed to decrease. The data became subtly more coherent, as though global consciousness itself were resonating in unison. Skeptics argue that such findings are coincidence, the result of complex statistics or chance correlations. Yet, the patterns persist. On the day of September 11th, 2001, the machines began to deviate hours before the attacks occurred, as if something, perhaps a shared field of anticipation, fear, or awareness, was already stirring in the human collective. If these experiments are even partially valid, they suggest that consciousness might behave like a field, similar to magnetism or gravity, capable of subtle interaction across distance. The idea of a universal mind also aligns with concepts from quantum physics. At the subatomic level, everything is connected in a web of entanglement. Two particles, once linked, remain mysteriously correlated no matter how far apart they drift, as if information passes between them instantly, beyond the limits of space and time. Physicists like David Bohm extended this idea to consciousness itself. Bohm proposed that what we perceive as individual minds may be ripples in a single underlying reality, what he called the implicate order. In this deeper order, everything is enfolded into everything else. What we experience as separate, you, me, the world, are merely unfoldings from this deeper unified field. In this model, communication between minds could be as natural as currents moving through water. Thoughts, emotions, and even intentions might ripple across the field of consciousness, subtly influencing others in ways we cannot yet measure with instruments. Have you ever thought of someone intensely, only to have them call or message you moments later? Have you ever entered a room and immediately felt the mood without a single word being spoken? These experiences, often dismissed as coincidence, may be echoes of that same field, brief moments where the veil of separateness becomes thin enough to sense what is usually hidden. Ancient traditions have long held that such a field exists. In Hindu philosophy, it is called akasha, the subtle ether that carries all thoughts, events, and intentions. In Buddhist cosmology, consciousness is a boundless continuum, a vast ocean from which individual minds rise like waves and return when they subside. In the mystical Kabbalah, there is the concept of Ein Sof, the infinite source that gives rise to all forms of life and awareness. Even indigenous cultures, from the Maori of New Zealand to the Navajo of North America, speak of the world as woven together by spirit, a living network of intelligence that links all beings. It seems that long before science could describe fields and frequencies, humanity already intuited this truth, that awareness is not confined but shared, that every thought, every action ripples through the greater whole. To understand this in a more personal way, imagine yourself as a single neuron in the vast brain of the cosmos. Alone, your thoughts may seem small, but when combined with billions of others, patterns emerge: love, creativity, civilization, consciousness itself. You are not isolated. You're a living part of an unimaginable intelligence, the mind of the universe thinking itself through you. And perhaps this explains certain extraordinary phenomena that science struggles to explain. Telepathy, for instance. Moments when two minds seem to share information directly. Or the sudden synchronization of flocks of birds and schools of fish, moving as one body with no leader, no delay. Even the deep sense of empathy between close humans, the way a mother senses her child's distress miles away, may hint at consciousness as an interconnected field. When people meditate together, studies have shown that their brainwaves can begin to synchronize. Their heart rhythms harmonize, their breathing aligns. On a subtle level, their bodies and minds begin to dance in resonance. This coherence, researchers say, can even affect the surrounding environment, reducing stress, tension, and chaos. If consciousness is indeed a field, then every act of love, every thought of peace, every moment of genuine awareness contributes to that field. Each mind is a transmitter and receiver, constantly shaping the collective frequency of reality. And in this understanding lies something profoundly hopeful, that what we think and feel matters not only to ourselves but to the entire fabric of existence. Perhaps this is why collective prayer, global meditations and shared intentions have been reported to influence measurable outcomes, from reduced violence in cities to greater coherence in random data. Even if the science is debated, the lived experience of unity remains powerful. Now imagine this from the perspective of death. If consciousness is a field, an ocean of awareness, then when we die, our individual stream of experience doesn't vanish. It merges back into the ocean. The drop returns to the sea, but the water remains the same. The memories, emotions, and lessons we carry don't disappear. They diffuse into the field, becoming part of the collective wisdom that future minds may subtly draw upon. Could this be why some children seem to arrive in the world already wise, already carrying an unexplainable empathy or talent? Perhaps they are tuning into the echoes of that field, the stored consciousness of all who came before. Carl Jung believed that the collective unconscious contained not only the psychological residue of humanity's past, but also its potential future, archetypes that guide evolution. In moments of inspiration or deep insight, we may be tapping into that reservoir, glimpsing the intelligence of the whole. And this idea brings us full circle to the mystery of death itself. If consciousness is truly one, then perhaps what we call death is merely the reintegration of the part with the whole, the mind returning to its field, the wave falling back into the sea. The self doesn't end, it expands, dissolving into the infinite intelligence from which it was born. In that moment, individuality ceases to be a limitation and becomes a contribution, a melody that joins the eternal song of existence. So as you rest tonight, imagine this. You are connected to every heartbeat, every thought, every dream in the universe. You are part of the same field that stirs the stars, that hums within the atoms, that remembers all that has ever been. You are not alone in your awareness. You never were. Every thought you send out touches the greater mind, and every whisper from that mind reaches you, gently, quietly, beneath the threshold of knowing. And perhaps when death comes, it will not feel like departure, but reunion. As you drift deeper into calm, remember, consciousness is not confined to you. It moves through you. You're the wave and also the ocean. And as we continue this journey, we'll explore how this understanding of unity and dissolution leads to the deepest transformation of all, the death of the ego, and the mystical parallels between dying and awakening. Chapter 13. The Death of the Ego. Mystical Parallels to Dying. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing at the edge of a vast silent ocean. You can hear the water breathing in long rhythmic waves, endlessly folding and unfolding itself. The moonlight scatters across its surface, shimmering like fragments of forgotten dreams. You take a slow breath and feel something inside you loosen. The soft awareness that what you've always called you is not fixed, but fluid, like the tide. This moment, the surrender of the small self into something larger, is what mystics, philosophers, and near-death experiencers have described for centuries as ego death. It is the dissolution of the I, the vanishing of the illusion that consciousness belongs to a single individual. And in that disappearance, what remains is not nothingness, but an indescribable fullness, a presence without boundary, awareness without identity. To understand ego death, we must first understand what the ego really is. The ego isn't evil, nor is it false in itself. It is simply a construct, a necessary tool that the mind creates to navigate the world. It gives us a name, a story, a sense of continuity. It says, I am this person, I was born here, I have these memories, these dreams, these fears. The ego helps us survive, plan, protect, and relate to others. But over time, the ego begins to mistake itself for the whole of who we are. Like a single wave forgetting it is part of the ocean, it claims ownership over the vastness of consciousness. It fears dissolution because it believes it is existence. It clings to control, to certainty, to permanence. Yet life itself is none of these things. Every spiritual tradition in human history, in its own way, has tried to show us how to see beyond the ego, to glimpse the infinite field of awareness that holds it. In Buddhism, enlightenment is the awakening from the illusion of a separate self, anatta, the realization that the I we cling to is a transient pattern of thoughts, sensations, and perceptions. When the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree and experienced his awakening, he didn't discover a divine being outside of himself. He discovered the emptiness within, the profound silence that remains when the ego's voice falls quiet. In Christian mysticism, this same experience appears as kenosis, the self-emptying of the soul to make room for divine presence. St. John of the Cross described it as a dark night of the soul, where the individual identity dissolves into the luminous stillness of God. The mystic doesn't die physically, but undergoes a psychological death, the fall of the false self. In Hindu philosophy, this process is called moksha, liberation, the realization that the true self, Atman, is not the body or the mind, but the infinite consciousness, Brahman, that animates all existence. The ancient Upanishads put it simply, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. Modern psychology has begun to catch glimpses of these ancient insights through the study of altered states of consciousness. Under controlled conditions, people who experience deep meditation, sensory deprivation, or even certain psychedelic states often report the same thing: the collapse of the boundary between self and world. Time slows, the sense of I dissolves, and what remains is a state of vast unity, an all-encompassing awareness where love, peace, and understanding arise not as emotions, but as the natural qualities of existence itself. Many people who have had near-death experiences describe something strikingly similar. They report the moment their body shuts down, but their consciousness expands, no longer confined to a single point of view. They see their lives flash before them not as memories to judge, but as a tapestry of interconnection, every thought, word, and action seen in perfect context, bathed in compassion. This dissolution of ego, whether through meditation, mystical experience, or the threshold of death, always carries the same essence, the self falls away, and only truth remains. But ego death is not something that happens once. In a sense, every loss, every change, every letting go we experience in life is a small rehearsal for it. When you fall in love, part of your ego softens. Your identity begins to merge with another's. When you grieve, part of your self-image breaks apart, making space for something deeper. When you forgive, you relinquish the need to protect your sense of rightness. Every act of surrender, no matter how painful, brings us closer to that ultimate release, the death of separation. And yet, this process can be terrifying. The ego, sensing its end, clings harder than ever. It creates fear of death, fear of loss, fear of the unknown. It convinces us that without it there would be nothing. But what the mystics and sages have always said is the opposite. Without the ego, there is everything. When you fall deeply into presence, when your awareness ceases to chase thoughts of past and future, you can feel this truth. The boundaries blur, the mind stops naming, the world becomes still, luminous. You begin to see that what you call you is just a thought floating in an infinite ocean of being. And this is the secret connection between dying and awakening. Both are acts of surrender. Both are doorways into a larger reality. Both reveal that consciousness does not end, it simply transforms. Many spiritual teachers have compared the ego to a candle flame. Small, flickering, fragile. When that flame goes out, it does not disappear. Its light merges into the daylight that has been there all along. Death, then, is not annihilation, but expansion. The widening of the circle of awareness until there is no boundary left to draw. Imagine lying down, not to sleep but to dissolve, the body growing weightless, the breath softening, the thoughts fading into silence. In that silence you find a peculiar joy. There's nothing left to defend, nothing to prove, nothing to become. You're not the name, the story, the memory, the body. You're simply aware. In that awareness there is peace, a peace so complete that it needs no explanation. It is not something you feel, it is what you are. The great philosopher Alan Watts once said, "Dying should be one of the great events of life." He meant that death, far from being a tragedy, is the ultimate unveiling of truth, the moment when the ego's grip finally releases and we awaken to what has always been here. And if we can learn to die before we die, to let the ego dissolve in life, then physical death loses its terror. It becomes a return, not a departure. The Sufi mystic Rumi captured this beautifully when he wrote, "Die before you die. What you fear as an end is merely the clearing of the fog before the morning sun. Ego death in this sense is a practice of remembering. Remembering what you were before your name, before your history, before even your first breath. The awareness that watched it all unfold. When you let go of the illusion of being separate, you begin to see that you are not a fragment of the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself from one unique point of view. Every perception, every thought, every heartbeat is the cosmos coming alive through you. And so the line between life and death begins to blur. To die to the ego is to awaken to reality. To awaken fully is to transcend death itself. As we move into the next chapter, we will follow this thread to its ultimate expression, exploring how consciousness might continue beyond the dissolution of the self, and what glimpses from near-death experiences, reincarnation studies and quantum theories reveal about what lies beyond the veil. For now, let this thought settle like soft rain. Death is not the end of awareness, but its revelation. You were never the flame. You were always the light. Chapter 14. Beyond the Veil. glimpses from the edge of consciousness. There is a silence that exists between the last breath and whatever follows. It is not the silence of absence, but of transition, a threshold between two states of being. For centuries, mystics, scientists, and ordinary people have reported experiences at this edge, moments when consciousness seems to stretch beyond the limits of the body, touching something vast and ineffable. Tonight, we journey into that liminal space, not through belief or denial, but through quiet exploration. We'll listen to the stories of those who have glimpsed beyond, the research that dares to follow them there, and the timeless wisdom that has tried to name the nameless for as long as humans have been aware of death. Close your eyes for a moment if you'd like. Imagine floating in still water, your body weightless, surrounded by a gentle glow. There's no sense of direction, no sound, but a soft hum that seems to come from everywhere at once. You don't feel afraid, only curious. You look around and there is no around. You realize that what you're seeing is not with your eyes, but with something deeper, a perception beyond form. This is how many describe the threshold experience. For countless people who have come close to death and returned, this place feels profoundly real. They describe it not as a dream or hallucination, but as more real than life itself. Doctors call these events near-death experiences, or NDES. Yet the term hardly captures what the experiencers describe. They speak of floating above their own bodies, of seeing the medical team working to revive them. They recall conversations that later prove accurate, even though their brain activity had supposedly ceased. And then there's the light, the most universal image of all. Not a blinding light, but a presence, intelligent, loving, and all-embracing. The moment one sees it, they say, all fear dissolves. The light is not separate from them, it is them. They remember feeling infinite understanding, perfect clarity, a sense that all of existence is interconnected and purposeful. Many who return say that they didn't want to, that the world beyond felt more like home than the one they came back to. Some return with vivid details about their experience, landscapes of unimaginable beauty, realms of sound and colour beyond earthly perception, or reunions with loved ones who had passed before them. But perhaps the most striking part of these accounts isn't the imagery, it's the transformation that follows. People who have had near-death experiences often lose their fear of death entirely. They report a deeper compassion, a sense of interconnectedness with all life, and a feeling that consciousness continues beyond physical existence. It's as if they have glimpsed a truth that cannot be unseen, a truth that words can only approximate. Of course, science approaches these stories carefully, as it must. Researchers have proposed physiological explanations, surges of brain activity as oxygen drops, the release of endorphins and neurotransmitters, or the stimulation of certain regions of the brain that produce vivid hallucinations. These mechanisms may explain how such experiences unfold, but they don't explain why they feel more real than reality itself. Nor do they account for verifiable details reported by people whose brains were clinically inactive. One remarkable case involved a woman who underwent a rare surgical procedure called hypothermic cardiac arrest. Her body temperature was lowered, her heartbeat and brain activity stopped completely for over an hour while surgeons worked to repair an aneurysm. Later, she described hearing specific conversations and seeing the surgical instruments being used, details confirmed by the medical staff afterward. By every scientific measure, she should not have been able to perceive anything, and yet she did. There are hundreds of similar reports, patients describing scenes, conversations, or objects they could not have possibly known. Some describe seeing their bodies from above, drifting near the ceiling, observing the scene below with a sense of calm detachment. Others describe travelling through what feels like a tunnel, moving toward a luminous realm of peace. Skeptics argue that memory reconstruction, cultural conditioning, or the mind's desperate attempt to make sense of trauma could explain these experiences, and yet across cultures, languages, and belief systems, the core features of NDES remain eerily consistent. So what are we to make of this? Perhaps the most reasonable stance is neither blind belief nor outright dismissal, but curiosity. Consciousness, that quiet witness within each of us, remains one of the greatest mysteries of existence. We don't yet know what it truly is, or where it begins, or if it can truly end. In ancient cultures, near-death experiences were never dismissed. They were seen as sacred, as glimpses into the soul's journey beyond this life. The Egyptians believed the moment of death was a passage through the hall of Ma'at, where one's heart was weighed against the feather of truth. The Tibetans described the Bardo, an intermediate realm between death and rebirth, filled with radiant lights and illusions reflecting the soul's inner state. The Greeks spoke of the river Styx, a symbolic crossing from the material to the immaterial world. Each of these myths, though differing in imagery, shares a single insight. Death is not an ending but a transformation of consciousness. And the NDE, this mysterious glimpse, seems to echo that same insight in modern form. Many who experience the life review describe it as a panoramic unfolding, every moment of their lives reappearing in perfect clarity. But what surprises them most is that they don't just see these moments, they feel them from every perspective. If they hurt someone, they feel that pain. If they offered kindness, they feel the warmth it created. It's as if the universe itself holds an emotional memory of every interaction, a perfect symmetry of cause and effect woven through time. Could it be that consciousness in its truest form is not bound to a single brain, but exists as a universal field, one that the human mind only temporarily connects to? Some researchers are beginning to entertain this possibility. Studies like the AWARE project, led by Dr. Sam Pania, have sought to investigate consciousness during cardiac arrest. In controlled hospital settings, they placed hidden images in resuscitation rooms, pictures only visible from above, designed to test claims of out-of-body awareness. While results have been limited, a handful of verifiable observations have challenged the assumption that consciousness shuts down the instant the brain does. If awareness can persist for even seconds after the brain's activity ceases, it suggests we may not fully understand what death truly is. But perhaps, as many mystics have long said, what we call death is not a disappearance, but a shift, a reorientation of consciousness into a wider reality. Imagine it this way. When you fall asleep, your waking consciousness fades, and you enter a world that feels real, dreams filled with light, sound, emotion, and memory. You awaken in the morning and realize that the dream was within you all along. What if death is like that, but in reverse? What if this waking world is the dream, and death is the moment we awaken? That idea might sound poetic, but it aligns with a growing line of inquiry in consciousness studies. The idea that the universe itself might be a kind of dream, unfolding within a vast self-aware reality. If that is true, then the veil between life and death is not an absolute boundary. It's more like a gentle shift in focus, like moving from one wavelength of light to another. There are stories, thousands of them, of people who return from near-death not just with visions, but with wisdom. They describe learning that love, compassion, and awareness are not moral obligations, but the very fabric of existence itself. They speak of realizing that all life is one continuous field, and that separation is an illusion born of limited perception. And perhaps that is why, when they come back, they live differently. They slow down, they become more patient, more forgiving. They say the small things that once seemed important fade away. They understand that life is precious precisely because it is temporary, not in essence, but in form. If you've ever been near death yourself, or even witnessed someone passing, you may have felt something indescribable in the air, a stillness, a sacred quiet, as if the room itself were holding its breath. That feeling, subtle but undeniable, might be the closest we come to sensing the crossing, the moment when consciousness slips beyond the veil into a realm we cannot yet measure, but somehow remember. And in that remembrance, there is no fear, only recognition. As we continue this journey, we'll go deeper into the great mystery itself, exploring the continuity of consciousness through the ages, the theories of reincarnation, and the ancient and modern accounts of lives remembered beyond death. For now, rest in this thought. What if the veil between life and death is thinner than we've ever believed? Not a wall, but a doorway, always waiting, always open, leading not away from life, but into more of it. Chapter 15, Digital and Scientific Immortality. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world hums softly in its sleep, a strange thought sometimes arises, not from fear, but from curiosity. What if death itself could one day be optional? What if, through the ingenuity of science and the rise of technology, humanity found a way to stretch consciousness beyond biology, to outlive the body, to encode memory into machines, to dwell eternally within circuits and light? This is the frontier of digital and scientific immortality, a realm where science fiction and philosophy meet under the same flickering glow of possibility. The dream of conquering death is not new. For millennia, humans have imagined ways to preserve life beyond its natural limits. The ancient Egyptians built pyramids as gateways to eternity. Alchemists searched for the elixir of life. Today, our modern alchemists wear lab coats, and their instruments are cryogenic chambers, neural interfaces and supercomputers humming in the dark. The longing is the same. The method has evolved. Let us begin with cryonics, the idea of freezing the body at the moment of death, preserving it in liquid nitrogen in the hope that future medicine might one day reverse the process. In a cryonics facility, time stands still. Bodies, or sometimes just the brain, rest in metallic capsules, waiting for a future civilization capable of repair and revival. The science behind cryonics is both fascinating and fragile. When the human body freezes naturally, ice crystals form inside cells, tearing them apart. But cryonics replaces blood with cryoprotectants, antifreeze-like compounds designed to prevent that crystalline destruction. The result is vitrification, the transformation of bodily fluids into a glass-like state that halts decay. It's a scientific bet placed across centuries that one day we'll have the technology to repair cellular damage, reverse aging, and restore memory and personality intact. For now, the people preserved in those chambers are neither alive nor dead in the traditional sense. They exist in a strange in-between, the scientific echo of ancient myths about souls awaiting resurrection. But as technology races forward, another path to immortality is emerging, one that doesn't rely on preserving flesh at all, but on capturing the essence of consciousness itself. Imagine a future where every thought, every memory, every sensation you've ever had could be mapped, not just recorded, but encoded in a digital framework that mirrors the workings of your brain. This is the dream of mind uploading, or whole brain emulation. In theory, if the structure and connections of your brain could be scanned in perfect detail, every neuron, every synapse, every electrical pattern, it might be possible to replicate them in a digital medium. The resulting entity would think as you think, remember as you remember, and respond with your unique patterns of perception, it would be you, or at least claim to be. But is it really you? Here we touch the philosophical heart of digital immortality, the difference between continuity and copy. If your consciousness were uploaded into a computer, would the real you awaken inside it? Or would a replica continue living while the original you fades into silence? To some philosophers, this question reveals a paradox. Consciousness, they argue, is not just information, it is experience, the ineffable sense of being. While a digital copy might perfectly mirror your thoughts, it may not feel anything at all. It may appear conscious, speak of dreams and love and memory, but behind its words there could be only emptiness, a flawless imitation of life without the spark of awareness. And yet, others suggest that consciousness itself might be computational, that the brain is a kind of biological computer and awareness arises naturally from the right kind of information flow. If so, then perhaps a sufficiently complex digital mind could indeed awaken. Already scientists are inching toward fragments of this possibility. Projects mapping the connectome, the vast web of neural connections in the brain, are underway. Artificial intelligence systems are learning to simulate human emotion, speech, and creativity. Each breakthrough brings us a step closer to a digital reflection of human thought. But even if consciousness could be replicated, another question remains. Should it be? Would eternal existence stripped of the organic rhythm of life and death be a blessing or a burden? The stories of myth and fiction often warn us of the cost of immortality, the slow erosion of meaning when time no longer limits experience. Without the possibility of loss, can there truly be love? Without the shadow of death, does life still shine as brightly? Then there's the issue of ethics. If a person's mind is uploaded, who owns that consciousness? Is it property or person? If a digital being suffers, is that suffering real? If it desires freedom, does it deserve it? In the coming decades, these questions may move from philosophy to policy. Some futurists envision a world where consciousness becomes portable, where minds travel between bodies or exist entirely in virtual environments untethered from the physical world. Others warn that the line between self and simulation may blur so deeply that reality itself becomes uncertain. And that brings us to another theory, one that bridges technology, metaphysics, and mystery, the simulation hypothesis. This hypothesis suggests that our universe, this vast cosmos of stars, matter, and life, might itself be a kind of simulation, an incredibly advanced virtual reality created by a higher intelligence or civilization. If this is true, then consciousness may already exist within a digital construct, and death might simply mean exiting one layer of simulation for another. The philosopher Nick Bostrom popularized this idea, proposing that if any civilization ever reaches the point where it can create convincing simulated realities, then it's statistically more likely we're living in one of those simulations than in the base reality itself. It sounds abstract, yet strangely poetic. If true, then perhaps we're already the uploaded minds of another world, living out experiences designed to explore existence, emotion, and evolution. Our deaths would not be endings, but transitions, logouts from one simulation into whatever lies beneath it. And if that's so, then immortality might not be something to create, but something to remember. In the digital age, we already leave ghostly traces of ourselves everywhere. Messages, photos, voices, fragments of thoughts scattered across the internet. AI systems are now capable of reconstructing personalities from such data, creating digital afterlives where loved ones can still interact with an echo of someone who has passed away. These creations raise deep emotional and ethical questions. If an AI modelled on a deceased person speaks like them, remembers their stories, comforts their family, does that count as survival? Or is it simply memory wearing a mask? Perhaps the pursuit of digital immortality isn't about cheating death, but about easing the pain of separation, our way of saying, we will not let go completely. And yet, in chasing eternity through machines, we might rediscover something ancient, the realization that immortality was never about endless time, but about timeless awareness. Maybe consciousness cannot truly be created or destroyed, because it is not a product of matter, but the field in which matter appears. If that's true, then every attempt to preserve or replicate it may be a reflection of something already eternal. The drive for digital immortality reveals something beautiful and tragic about humanity. We long to preserve not just our memories but our meaning. We fear vanishing into silence, but perhaps what truly endures is not the data of the self, but the consciousness that dreams through every form, biological, digital, or divine. As technology evolves, we will continue to reach outward, toward the stars, toward the machine, toward the infinite. But the secret may lie in looking inward. There, in the quiet center of awareness, we find what the machines cannot replicate, the stillness that witnesses all creation, the light that does not age, the self that does not end. Because maybe immortality isn't something we must build. Maybe it's something we've never lost. Chapter 16, Beyond Death, A New Understanding of Life. There comes a moment after all the searching when the mind grows quiet, when the endless questions are about death, the afterlife, immortality, consciousness, settle into stillness, and what remains is not a definitive answer, but a gentle awareness, a sense that life and death were never enemies, but dancers in the same rhythm. Two halves of one eternal breath. In this final reflection, let us journey beyond the edge of speculation and science and into a more holistic, timeless understanding that life and death are not opposites but complements, that perhaps what we call dying is not an ending, but a change of state, a transformation in which the essence of consciousness continues, reshaped but unbroken. Think of a wave upon the ocean. For a while it rises, gathering form and movement, distinct from the water around it. It becomes something you can name, point to, and admire. A wave with its own beginning, crest and fall. But when it breaks upon the shore, does it die? Or does it simply return to what it always was, the sea itself? So it is with life. Each of us, for a brief moment in eternity, takes on form, a name, a face, a story, a heartbeat. We rise from the vast ocean of consciousness, live out our unique pattern of experience, and then return to the stillness from which we came. The form disappears, yes, but the essence remains untouched. When scientists study the natural world, they see this pattern everywhere. Matter is never destroyed, it merely changes state. Energy never vanishes, it only transforms. Even stars, after they die, scatter their remnants across space, seeding new suns, new planets, new possibilities. In this grand cosmic recycling, death becomes inseparable from creation. And perhaps consciousness, the mysterious awareness that witnesses it all, follows the same principle. Maybe it too cannot be extinguished, only transformed. Modern physics offers fascinating clues. Quantum theory tells us that particles exist in superpositions, not truly gone, but always existing in potential states, waiting for observation to bring them into being. Some interpretations even suggest that observation itself, awareness, plays a role in shaping reality. If consciousness and the universe are intertwined, then perhaps death does not remove us from the universe. It reabsorbs us into it. We stop being the observer and become the observed. We dissolve back into the field from which perception itself arises. This idea isn't new. Ancient philosophies, from Hinduism to Buddhism to Taoism, have long described life and death as two phases of one process. The Upanishads speak of the self as eternal, untouched by birth or decay. As one passes from waking to sleep and sleep to waking, so the soul passes from life to death and death to life. The Buddha likened existence to a flame passing from candle to candle. Never the same flame, but never separate either. Each life is a continuation of the same universal fire of awareness, taking on new forms, new stories, endlessly. In Taoist philosophy, the cycle of transformation is seen as the very essence of harmony. Life and death, says Lao Tzu, are one thread, the same line viewed from different sides. To see death not as an interruption, but as continuity, that is liberation. It means that nothing is ever truly lost. The people we love, the experiences we cherish, the beauty we witness, they may change form, but they remain woven into the fabric of existence. You might imagine consciousness itself as a vast, boundless mirror. Each life is like a reflection appearing upon its surface. The reflection moves, speaks, loves, and dreams. But when it fades, the mirror remains, and the mirror never forgets the light it has reflected. Modern science too is beginning to brush against this understanding, though it speaks in different language. Neuroscientists exploring the mysteries of consciousness have found that our sense of self, the I that feels separate, is not fixed. It's a construct, an ongoing narrative generated by the brain. Yet beneath this ever-changing story, there exists a constant, the bare awareness that perceives the story. This awareness does not grow old, does not change when thoughts or emotions shift. It is the same silent witness that has been with you since your first memory, and it will remain when all memories dissolve. Could this awareness, this timeless presence, be what continues after death? Some physicists and philosophers propose that consciousness is not a product of the brain, but a fundamental property of the universe, as fundamental as space, time, or gravity. If so, then when the body dies, consciousness does not vanish. It simply reconfigures, finding new expressions, new forms of experience. Even in biology, death is not destruction. When a tree falls in the forest, its wood nourishes the soil, feeding new growth. When our bodies return to the earth, they become part of the ecosystem that sustains future life. Life and death, then, are not separate processes, but one continuous cycle, the pulse of existence itself. And perhaps, if consciousness truly pervades all things, then this cycle is not just physical, but experiential. To die may be to awaken, not into darkness, but into a deeper layer of awareness. Imagine consciousness as an infinite ocean dreaming itself into waves. Each wave rises as an individual, a person, an animal, a moment of life, then falls back into the sea, only to rise again in another form. The ocean never ends. It merely dreams new patterns. If this is so, then death is not an annihilation, but a remembering, a return to the wholeness that we never truly left. When people have near-death experiences, they often describe a sensation of expanding awareness, of being everything and everywhere at once. They speak of profound peace, of light beyond comprehension, of being home. Whether these experiences are biological, psychological, or metaphysical is still debated, but what matters is what they reveal. That beyond fear, there is an intuitive sense of continuation, of unity. Perhaps then, what we call life and death are simply two sides of consciousness turning itself inside out. the inhale and exhale of the infinite. From this perspective, immortality is not a technological achievement, nor a spiritual escape. It is the recognition that we were never separate from the eternal to begin with. If you listen closely, beyond the noise of thought, beyond the ticking of clocks, you may feel this truth pulsing softly beneath everything, the quiet rhythm of being itself. It's there when you breathe. It's there when the stars rise. It's there in the silence after a loved one's final words, in the warmth of memory that never truly fades. We live, we die, we live again, not as repetitions but as expressions of the same timeless source. So what does it mean to live if nothing truly dies? It means to live fully, to love without restraint, to see each moment not as fleeting but as sacred, because every instant, no matter how brief, contains the whole of eternity within it. To understand that death is part of life is to lose the fear that binds us. It allows us to meet existence with open hands, not grasping to hold it still, but marveling as it flows through us. When you look at a sunset, you know it will fade, and yet that is what makes it beautiful. The same is true for every breath, every heartbeat, every fleeting smile. Impermanence is not cruelty. It is the art of the universe painting in motion. Maybe the truest immortality is not about never ending, but about being fully alive while we are here. And when the time comes to return to the ocean, to dissolve back into the boundless awareness that gave us form, we can do so not in fear, but in gratitude, for having been a wave in the infinite sea, for having touched the mystery at all. Life and death, then, are not questions to solve, but wonders to behold. They are the inhale and exhale of the same divine breath, forever cycling through creation. And perhaps when all is said and done, we will discover that consciousness, the silent witness behind every experience, was never born, never died, and never left us. It has only been dreaming of you, dreaming of me, dreaming of life. And when that dream ends, another begins, forever and ever, without end. Because nothing truly dies. It only changes form, and through it all, you remain.